Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Laura Capps. I'm president of the Santa Barbara School Board, and I call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified Board of Education on September 22nd, 2020. It is a little bit after 6:36, and it's nice to see everybody on Zoom. Can't wait till we're all back together. I want to first turn it over to our interpreters to give the explanation. I believe that would be Mr. Bacalba.
Thank you, President Capps. I will make this announcement in both English and Spanish. So first I will say it in English and then I will say it in Spanish. Good evening. In order to provide language access, we will be providing simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into English and Spanish. If you are bilingual, you don't have to click anything. If you are not bilingual in English and Spanish, you will have to select your language in order to hear the interpretation. If you are on a laptop or desktop, you will see a globe at the bottom right of your screen. Please click on the globe icon that says interpretation and select English. If you are on an iPad or a similar device like your phone, locate the three-dot menu and select language interpretation, then select English. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace. If you have trouble with the interpretation audio, click on interpretation, then mute original audio. If the audio issue persists, please send me a direct message through the chat. Thank you. Buenas tardes. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional en inglés y en español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe, tendrá que elegir su idioma para escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice Interpretación. Haga clic ahí y seleccione Español. Si está usando un iPad o dispositivo parecido, como su teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y elija Español. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado. Si tiene alguna dificultad con el audio de interpretación, envíenme un mensaje directo por el chat. Gracias. We will also post these same instructions in the chat for everybody to see in case they join us later. También vamos a poner estas mismas instrucciones en el chat para que cualquier persona que llegue después pueda ver las instrucciones. Okay, are there any questions with regards to interpretation or the functions, where to click? If there are no questions, then we may begin, and I will now ask the host to go ahead and add me as an interpreter, and then we may begin.
Excellent, thank you so much. And now I turn it over to Superintendent Maldonado to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Board President Capps. Good evening, board members and everyone else joining us this evening. Buenas noches. Please put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is action in closed session. There were no actions taken in closed session prior to coming into open session. So that brings us to the superintendent's report. Ms. Maldonado again.
Thank you. It gives me great honor and I'm humbled to bring to you today a couple of items. Hispanic Heritage Month, as you know, takes place September 15th to October 15th and traditionally honors the cultures, contributions of both Hispanic and Latino Americans and heritage rooted in all Latin American countries. In honor of this special time, we have launched a social media campaign recognizing a new Hispanic leader each day. And I want to also recognize that as we celebrate these months of recognizing different cultures and traditions in our country, I want to outline some of the things we all share in common, which is our love for country, our collaboration, our culture, our traditions that many of us share that are similar. But today, we did honor Sonia Sotomayor, Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. She is the 3rd female justice in the United States Supreme Court history and the first Hispanic and Latina member of the court. Justice Sotomayor has been a passionate and eloquent voice on calls for reform of the criminal justice system and on issues of race, gender, and ethnic identity. With that, board members, it's a perfect segue for another important historical moment in our country and an important figure, which many of us are mourning today and this week, the notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'd like to invite our school board members to join me in highlighting why Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a leading force in securing women's rights to
obtain a mortgage without a male cosigner,
open a checking account without a male cosigner,
start a business without a male cosigner,
the right to get a credit card without a male cosigner,
obtain a business loan without a male cosigner,
obtain a job without gender-based discrimination,
obtain and retain employment while pregnant,
obtain birth control without having to have a husband's permission,
not be forced to provide proof of sterilization to obtain, retain employment,
pension benefits equal to male coworkers,
equal consideration to be executors of their children's estate.
Thank you, board members. As you can see, we honor and I'd like to dedicate this meeting to our Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her memory, and thank for all her rights that we have earned under her leadership.
Thank you, Superintendent Maldonado. Does that conclude your report?
That concludes my report. Thank you. I should have said that.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. We certainly do honor her. And I want to turn it now over to the board for any comments and correspondence that we wish to share with the public and with each other. Okay, Ms. Ford, I see your hand first.
Thank you so much. You know, I was more grief-stricken by the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg than I could have predicted. And I know it was not just because of her stunning intellect and her beautiful humanity and the countless decisions, as you just heard, to powerfully uphold and defend our constitutions, but also because I was feeling actually pretty hopeless. And so I had to take some time to grieve and to focus on gratitude and hope. And so with that in mind, I want to express my deep gratitude to all the principals and their staffs and the PTAs too, who wonderfully adapted back to school nights on Zoom. I attended Dos Pueblos High School, Washington Elementary, and Goleta Valley Junior High so far. And although they were all very different, they were also well organized, interesting, and clearly dedicated to helping make everyone feel positive and hopeful and determined to make the best of whatever situation the schools face this year. So for me, special thanks to Mr. Woodard, Ms. Granger, and Mr. Ortega. I also want to recognize and honor that Monday is September 28th, and that is Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year in Judaism. And it's a day of many hours of fasting and celebrating solemnly, with most of it spent praying for forgiveness and a good year. And then finally, just something I'm sure we'll hear more about in the future, and maybe even from Susan Klein Rothschild later in our meeting, but there is a countywide initiative that I'm part of to involve everyone in the power of fighting COVID-19 by wearing masks. It's tentatively called Masked and Mighty. And I'm so excited about it because I think it will inspire all of us to feel like we as a community can help in ways that are going to be fun, engaging, and make us feel hopeful.
Thank you, Ms. Ford, for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Sims-Moton.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that eloquent presentation, Ms. Ford. In terms of that, I do appreciate also getting the opportunity to attend the back to school nights, and just appreciated all the effort to go into, to again, make it a back to school night and making sure the parents were able to communicate with their teachers. And we had the opportunity to thank the teachers, thank all the staff who made it possible, and also to thank the students for their hard work and staying in there. And I would just have, I'm sure there are many quotes that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, but one of the things she said that I just can't quit. And so we can't quit. We have a lot of work ahead. We can continue to do this, and we will get back to the in-person learning. So we just want to stay with making sure that we're adapting and adjusting and being persevering and being patient through it all. So we can't quit. We can't stop. until we get back into our in-person safely and healthy. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mrs. Moten. Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what everyone else has said. I had an opportunity to also attend a number of back to school nights, McKinley's, home of the Bears, and also the Mariners, Goleta Valley Junior High, and really wanted to commend the principals and their leadership and design of these back to school nights. They were just very transparent, well organized, and just upbeat and positive. And I think that the staff that were involved were very informative of what was going on. And I know we weren't in person, but it was an experience where you really felt connected, and you felt that there was a passion and power and perseverance behind the staff and administrators putting it together. And I just hope that all of the parents and students who are involved felt the same way, and that you are having a great start to your year. And I just would say that it's an opportunity, like Ms. Sims Moten said, to really keep moving forward, to persevere, and to look positive, that we have opportunities here to really make a difference and within this challenging time, but also just be sort of respectful of that opportunity that we can bring forward for everyone. And I just want to thank everyone. So I'll be quiet now.
Thanks, Dr. Reed. Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I also am want to echo my fellow board members I went to attended back to school night via Zoom. I give credit to Jennifer Foster and all her team at La Colita Junior High, including the IT person that was in charge. I felt like I was part of the school and really appreciated each teacher sharing, what they're doing. And it was very, friendly to including all the parents of the students. And I also wanted to just mention, in terms of, Hispanic Heritage Month, one of the, civil rights labor leader that I've had the honor to meet and chat with several times, with Dolores Huerta, who at the age of 90 and having, such a long track of work in the community, continues to do that and inspires all of us. Also, as part of Meta, I had the honor of meeting Reina Grande, an author who speaks about her experience coming from Mexico, crossing the border, and an award-winning author. With one of her books is The Distance Between Us, which I had shared, right after she presented to us. And just so much that we have in common with others in terms of the different experiences here in the country, and being a mentor to our students as to how everyone can pick up a pen and share their experience and teach each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Munoz. I'll chime in on the back to school night. I love them. I love sitting in my son's desk and kind of imagining what his world is like there. And so to do it on Zoom is a challenge. But I want to commend our principals and teachers and staff for making these back to school nights as engaging as possible. I joined Goleta Valley Junior High and Monroe. I especially appreciate Mr. Naughton at Monroe. Started off by pictures of all of the essential workers that have been working at Monroe all summer and are there every day. So thank you. And in the spirit of COVID and our new reality, I just wanted to address our communications and our intention and determination to improve. There's so much about this virus that is mysterious and challenging and mind-numbing, but there is an aspect of it that we can always do better, and that's in communication. And our board meetings, I apologize for the last few, at least the last one in particular, we've gotten to the COVID report so late in the evening because of other pressing issues that I heard from many parents and others who, it's just too late. It's not fair. And I fully agree. And I know the board does too, because we have an annual governance meeting as a board, and we met last Saturday, a public meeting, members of the public were there, and we really dove in on many topics, the way that we conduct ourselves as a board, but starting with the procedures of this meeting. So you're going to see things run a little bit differently tonight. It's an experiment. We are trying to, again, all with the intention of making sure in this historic time with so much information that's changing and needs to be communicated and needs to be delved into, and we need to hear from experts like we get to do, and for the staff to engage with us in this public way. We need to make sure that the public and all of us can get to these meetings, get to the topic at hand at a timely way. So there's 3 solutions to this that we are trying, and I put the emphasis on trying because if things don't work quite the right way, we can adjust as we go forward. But the first is that our COVID reports for the foreseeable future will be at a time certain at 7 p.m. So that's in about 7 minutes. And that means that we'll hear from staff, we'll hear from experts, we'll hear from the public, and it'll be a chance for the board to discuss the latest updates related to COVID at a very, hopefully, reasonable hour before kids need to be put to bed, et cetera. So that's at 7 p.m., which will really change the flow of the way that these meetings run. The second thing is that as in the Zoom environment, as some of you have taken note of, who've been part of these meetings, our public comment has really just multiplied exponentially, which is a wonderful thing. We should state that public comment is not the only way. It's just one of the ways that the board hears from the public. We respond and receive emails all throughout the week. We have calls, we have meetings, we could do outreach meetings, there are constituent meetings. So this is just one way for us to hear from the public prior to a vote, but it's certainly not the only way. And so in the spirit of trying to devote enough time to this pandemic, we will be trying out limiting public comment per agenda item so that we don't have, like we did at the last meeting, 3.5 hours of public comment. And like the last meeting, we're going to be much more intentional about identifying topics that are controversial and deserve their own separate meeting, like sex ed that we talked about for many hours, actually many hours this year, but many hours just 2 weeks ago. And so items like that, we will be moving to their own separate meeting to make sure that everyone has their voice heard and we can give those topics the attention they deserve, not at the expense of this very pressing pandemic. So this is all about how challenging these days are, how so much is new, how decisions are being made that have never been broached, never been decided before here, and how we're learning from others and elsewhere, and how much we're learning from the public. So I hope that this works, and I, as always, appreciate the feedback, but wanted to explain that that was a consensus of the board at our governance meeting last Saturday, and that's what we'll be trying here tonight. So that leads us right about 6:55, which gives us 5 minutes. And so I'm going to be kind of managing this agenda, some pieces out of order. And with this remaining 5 minutes before we go to the COVID report, I'm going to suggest that we move to the consent agenda so that we can take care of that before moving to the COVID report right at 7 o'clock, hopefully. So thanks everybody. And we will now move to, I lost my agenda item, but it would be item D1, general consent items. Does anyone want to, do any board members want to pull any items off the consent agenda? Yeah, Superintendent Maldonado.
I would like to speak to item D3 when it's appropriate, Board President.
I believe it would be appropriate now, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
That is, I will just introduce it. That is the approval of human resource recommendations, and you have the floor.
Thank you. As you, I would like to speak to 2 changes in the human resources report by Dr. John Vecchio. Board members, as you're aware, the stakeholder input from the superintendent's search process has been a major focus of the first 90 days of my superintendency. And in response to the stakeholder report, as well as the board's expression of the need for a more effective and precise family and community engagement, as well as an equity and access agenda for underrepresented groups, I've decided to elevate both Dr. Patricia Madrigal and Maria Larios Horton to be on the executive cabinet team. Dr. Patricia Madrigal's new title will be Executive Director of Partnerships and Community Engagement. For the last 9 years at Santa Barbara Unified, Dr. Madrigal has been able to establish an intentional private-public partnership between the Santa Barbara Unified Schools and the philanthropic sector, local colleges, and community agencies that together have impacted the opportunity gap and the educational trajectory of children. I like to call her work as work that has proven results. This work has led to the best practice in the area of college readiness and access, with our signature program, PEAK, that has supported our first generation college-bound students on a clear pathway to college, and most recently, the launch of our PEAK Fellowship for Education, which is a clear pathway for Santa Barbara Unified PEAK graduates to return as teachers to our organization. Through her leadership, Dr. Madrigal and team have raised millions of dollars annually to supplement key strategies and programming to support our students and their families. So it gives me great honor to support Dr. Madrigal in this new title and in this new role. The second person is Maria Larios Horton, whose new title will be Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, and Family Engagement. Maria Larios is an experienced educator of 22 years who has been a teacher and administrator and has helped us with parent issues of equity and family engagement at both a school district and county office level. In this district, she led the long-year development and ultimate adoption of the district's multilingual excellence transforming achievement plan with significant stakeholder input and a focus on cultural proficiency. She launched district-wide learning for our educators related to culturally sustaining learning and culturally responsive social emotional approaches, which has been well received and is now working on a more sustainable long-term action plan. She was selected to receive the Latino Legacy Award for Education by Future Leaders of America. The work that both of these women will be taking on is incredibly important to the work that we are focused on while we look at the achievement of all students, and especially those who have been historically marginalized in a coherent manner across all grade levels and systems so that we can positively outcome all their lives. So that we can positively impact all their lives. The responsibility of this work will not be just for the positions that they hold, but rather the important work related to transformational equity, and it will be held in a distributed manner across our district. With that, I'd like to turn it back to you, Board President.
Thank you for explaining that and speaking to that item. Are there any other items that the board wishes to pull before we vote on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion.
President Capps, I believe we have 3 public comments.
Oh, so thank you for that reminder, Mr. Rouse. I really appreciate it. So that I am turning it over to Ms. Garcia. Ms. Trujillo is not with us this evening. So Ms. Garcia, if you could do the honors, I believe. You're introducing the public comment, the speakers for this consent agenda.
Yeah, we actually just have 2. They are Barbara Parme and Sarah Henderson. So we'll have Barbara will go first.
And thank you. And our public speakers all throughout the evening will have 2 minutes, as I know that they've been informed.
Barbara, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Congratulations, Maria Larios Horton and Patricia Madrigal, on your appointments as executive directors. You will be the leaders in issues concerning diversity, equity, community partnerships, and engagement. As a community member of the Ethnic Studies Now Coalition for 3 years, I ask, do you know what ethnic studies means? Will you support an autonomous ethnic studies department, or will you make ethnic studies a bullet point in your dual language programming? As your present day ethnic studies teachers, the cadre can attest, the pedagogy of ethnic studies goes far beyond basic teaching methodology and requires engagement and support from all levels of the education bureaucracy. A dedicated ethnic studies department is an essential tool in making ethnic studies a success and not a watered down sham that will fail our children and our families of color. When ethnic studies has asked for and now demands a dedicated ethnic studies department, it is often misinterpreted as a threat. This misinterpretation has created a form of oppression called tone policing. Tone policing occurs when you tell us, be nice, don't raise your voice, don't complain, quit being angry, be patient. These responses come from a system that supports white supremacy. If the good intentions of school district administrators are to be believed, then you will support an autonomous ethnic studies department with at least the $400,000 you have spent on these equity executives. Thank you very much. Vote yes on Prop 15.
Thank you. We now have Sarah Henderson. One moment, I'm trying to find her. Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Congratulations to Maria Larios Horton and Patricia Madrigal. I'm sure that you both value equity and community engagement and will make wonderful equity executives. I'm also speaking as a member of Ethnic Studies Now and as a community member and graduate of the school district. And I say that I still have concerns about how this fits into the district's implementation of ethnic studies. Will ethnic studies fall under the district's broader diversity goals, or will it stand alone as its own department? Many times ethnic studies, the community, and the students of the Santa Barbara School District have requested and demanded a department, as it is the only way to make ethnic studies truly sustainable throughout the district. Every day, without this department and without a sustainable ethnic studies program, students, teachers, faculty, and community members are hurt by the current mode of education. That's because the current mode of education was built under white supremacy and still maintains the goals and pedagogy of white supremacy. As the board, the folks in charge, I have to ask you, what will you do to support an ethnic studies department? What will you do to encourage community engagement and to truly value and center your students who are right now being the most hurt? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you to our speakers. And now I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. I believe Ms. Sims-Moten with the motion and Ms. Ford with the second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, 7:05, we're close. We're moving it on to we're jumping down to item F1, which is report and discussion agenda on, it's report number 7 on school reopening / COVID. So I turn that over to Superintendent Maldonado.
Thank you, Board President. Thank you. Yes, it is definitely a team effort, and thank you for that. I am going to ask Mr. Rouse to please put up our presentation and remind us of the drivers. If you go to the next slide, please.
And just a housekeeping that we do have speakers for this, but they will have a chance to address us after hearing the report.
That is correct. Thank you very much. So board members, as you may recall, we use these drivers to ensure that we are mindful of all the different components that we need in ensuring that we are implementing either distance learning or in-person schooling in an appropriate way and addressing all the factors that COVID impacts. And with that, I'm going to go to the next slide, please, with our guest speaker, Ms. Susan Klein-Rothschild, who's been an incredible partner to us from the Public Health Department and has answered many of my calls late at night, early in the morning. And I will ask her to please give us an update of where the county is today and any changes that we need to consider as a school district.
Thank you, Superintendent and board members and the public. I'm going to share with you some of the most recent things that change. And as you've all discussed, COVID is a novel virus. It's new, we're learning, and it's changing all the time. So this is the latest that we know as of today. First thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is surveillance testing. Surveillance testing is routine testing of staff. It's testing of all staff who work in schools who have contact with other adults or children. It's not testing necessarily when someone has symptoms or someone's been near someone who's had COVID. It's just regular testing so we can find people who have COVID who may not know it. They may be asymptomatic, they may be pre-symptomatic, but this is how we find cases early. And with surveillance testing, when we find cases early, we immediately isolate those people. Because the quicker we put people out of a public environment and out of environment with others, the better we do at stopping the transmission and stopping the spread. And that's our goal. We want to contain it and stop the spread. So there's some new things happening with surveillance testing, that are very new that I want to share with you. So beginning November 1st, the governor and the state are going to be expanding the number of sites available for COVID testing here in Santa Barbara and statewide. They're going to be expanding it dramatically in November. So that's very exciting. There should be more sites and more free sites available for testing for anyone in the public, including school staff. We are also looking at the methods or the strategies for testing changing as the technology gets better. So one of the types of tests that's come on board that is showing itself to be very effective and reliable is saliva testing. And we're expecting that to be much more prevalent in November and beyond. There are some private labs who do saliva testing now. We think that will be part of the public testing environment, which makes it so much easier. Anyone can spit in a tube easily. You don't need a medical professional. It's just going to really, I think, help all of us make that testing process easier. So we're excited about that. And so in many ways, we are working to expand the possibilities for testing, the alternatives, and make it easier. More people get tested, the more we find cases people don't know, we isolate those people and we stop the spread. That is really our goal, stopping the spread of the virus. I would like to share another thing that was initiated by your Superintendent Maldonado. Thank you for her suggestion. She noted that many people, honestly, many people who work in the field as well as in the public, we're confused. The state has different guidance for child care programs and providers, different guidance for day camps, different guidance for youth sports, different guidance for schools, all these different things that we do with children and youth, they have different guidance. That means there are different things that need to take place. And some of those things can take place on a school site, even when the school is closed. So we are putting something together in the public health department to better communicate that. And it's going to be a blog, and we're going to try and help the community understand that even though they're all children and youth, there are different expectations for different kinds of activities and for different reasons. So thank you to your superintendent for raising that for our awareness. And then brand new out today, the state has tiers. We all know there are 4 tiers, right? And it's based on 2 major metrics, 2 things we're measuring. One is we're measuring out of everybody who gets tested for COVID here in Santa Barbara County, what percentage of them are positive and actually become a COVID case out of all those who tested. And the second measure is out of our whole population, out of every 100,000 people in Santa Barbara County, how many COVID cases do we have per 100,000? Those 2 measures are the 2 things that determine what tier we're on. We started off on the top tier, that is widespread. COVID is widespread in our community. That is, when it's available, when it's so widespread, it's much easier to transmit and pass it on to others. So we want to have less COVID in our community. As of today, the state posts data on a weekly basis. It's for a 7-day period, and there's a 7-day delay. Today, we have met the metrics for the red tier. If we keep our numbers in that area, next week, September 29th, we will actually move officially into the red tier, which is great. It means we have less COVID in our community in Santa Barbara County. That is excellent. If we stay at that number and we don't go up again, and we stay there for 2 weeks, we have the ability and the permission to reopen in-person instruction. So that's really important. And I know the superintendent's going to walk through her model for you about how your unified school district wants to consider that. But I want you to know it's a real possibility. It means we have to keep those numbers week after week. But if we all join together, everyone in the community, we know we can do it. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And that brings me, so if we are in the red tier on September 29th, and if we keep in the red tier for 2 more weeks, that means schools could officially reopen for in-person instruction on October 13th. That is the earliest date, if everything lines up, which is what we all hope. And then your board member, Kate Ford, spoke about our new initiative called Masked and Mighty. It's an initiative we began with participants from your school board, from other schools, from healthcare providers, from Santa Maria to Santa Barbara, school districts, healthcare providers, people in the community who all want to come together. We are putting together a campaign to engage the whole public in a positive campaign towards, we can do this. We can wear our masks. We can show how powerful we are, how mighty we are. We can engage our kids in being powerful and mighty. We're talking about a colorful ad campaign. We're talking about a unique launch in our COVID times. We're talking about engaging our kids in schools. You'll be hearing more about this, but I'm excited because I think we have an opportunity to move forward in a very positive and inspirational way. So those are the things I wanted to update you on tonight.
Thank you, Susan. We're now going to ask Dr. Becchio to share a little bit about what we're doing in the area of testing.
Thank you very much. Good evening, board members. And it was great to have Susan Klein-Rothschild here. And thank you for explaining the surveillance testing. And that is one of the bullet points on this slide, surveillance testing versus outbreak testing. And I think she did a great job of describing that. I'll go ahead and let the board know that we started surveillance testing. We're going to do the baseline testing for all of our employees over the next 4 weeks. This is in preparation for the eventuality that we will, well, currently we're starting cohorts. We've started athletics yesterday. We're starting cohorts next week, small cohorts. So we are preparing ourselves for what's to come in the coming months. We just completed 2 days of surveillance testing. We tested roughly 400 employees already in the last 2 days. We are actually rolling this out each week with a new group of employees that will report to the testing site and get tested. Those groups are prioritized based on the work that we think that they will do with kids and with other adults in our organization. And then we will be testing every 2 months per the county public health. And so we'll go through another testing protocol after 2 months. And again, the testing is changing. So we're not sure, what type of test. It could be the saliva test by that time. The testing is happening at the Armory, and it is a drive-through testing site. And so that is the report I wanted to give you on testing. And I will turn it over now to Dr. Wagenack. Thank you.
Do we have Dr.
All right, I'm on. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Becchio. Trying to get my notes back up here. So our, we know that it's very important that we use the science, that we follow the procedures. And so that's why I'm talking to you tonight about tracking and tracing of contacts. Now, Santa Barbara Public Health is ultimately responsible in the community for the tracking and tracing, but we want to reassure our staff and our families that we are also taking responsibility within our schools once students return to school for keeping track of the illness if and when it presents itself. So our team of 8 school nurses monitor the types of illnesses and symptoms amongst our student and staff to help isolate them promptly to avoid the spread of contagion. And using our screening tools, which includes a special app, phone app, as well as a special Google form that we've created to track exposure monitoring. This is going to allow our school nurses to track, isolate, and monitor the COVID virus daily. So as liaisons between the school site and Santa Barbara Public Health, our nurses are responsible for reporting the data for community tracking and tracing purposes. We, very simply put, if and when there are cases on our campuses, we want to identify those quickly and work with public health to make sure that we limit the spread. Now, I'm the liaison responsible for responding to COVID-19 concerns from the public at large, but also communicating any outbreak that we may have. And then at the school sites, the principals will serve in this capacity as well, addressing questions from staff and families. And they'll be consulting with our school nurses as appropriate. And again, the school nurses are the liaisons between Santa Barbara Public Health and their schools. And this is important because we know that folks are going to have questions, that you already have questions and you have concerns. And so we want to reiterate that we will be communicating clearly and regularly if and when there are cases of COVID in our schools. So when indicated and in coordination with Santa Barbara Public Health, COVID-19 exposures, and I'm crossing my fingers that this won't happen, but if there is a closure, it will be communicated to families clearly and swiftly, all the while maintain the confidentiality of those who do have COVID. So next slide, please. So when we are in purple or red, and it's great news that, that Susan Klein-Rothschild shared with us that we today just now qualify for being in the red. But when we're in purple or red, the state of California allows for schools to invite small cohorts of students onto campus for academic support. These cohorts, which are comprised of students with the most acute academic needs, may not exceed 25% of the school's total enrollment. So in our district, our small group cohorts will primarily consist of academic learning centers where students will participate in distance learning with their teachers and their classmates, but in a setting that provides staff support, consistent internet access, and a secure learning environment. In addition, we will also have classroom instruction for students with moderate to severe disabilities, as well as emergent multilingual students who are newcomers to the United States, those who are here 3 years or less. Now, these small group cohorts, which some will be shorter periods of time, some will be the entire length of the school day. These are fixed small group cohorts. So once they've been established, they will be closed after 1 week with no new students or adults entering the cohort. And the reason we're doing this and forming them in this way is in order to maintain the safety of the cohort. Finally, schools are going to begin contacting families to invite students to participate if they meet the qualification of having these acute academic needs. However, it's important to state that participation in these small cohorts is not required, but we are hoping that families will take advantage of them if they are needed. And next, I will pass it back to Ms. Maldonado.
Thank you, Dr. Wagenik and Dr. Becchio. Board members, just want to show this again to the public and remind us that the way that the new color coding system, and Susan Klein-Rothschild will help me if I misspeak, please jump in. The colors go from the higher risk to the lower risk of transmission in our community. Purple being widespread, red being substantial, orange being moderate, and yellow or gold, which we're calling gold minimal. And it's comprised of these two factors, which Susan has already explained. We have looked at this and studied this model, and we, last meeting, we proposed, can we go to the next slide, please? We proposed that our school district consider how to look at these in terms of how we slowly make our way back into classrooms. Again, assessing as a superintendent, both what the virus is doing in our community, but also looking at several feasibility, which I'll speak to in the next slide. We want to remind you that we are slowly making our way back through what was just discussed, small cohorts, athletics, testing staff. So we're making our way towards these phases. We are setting our goal, and I like that we have this new campaign. So now we may have competing campaigns. We really wanted to think about this work as a goal to move to gold by January 19th. This is a challenge we're giving out to ourselves, but also to our community, while we continue to assess the virus, its effect on our community, and we learn from the implementation of, again, small cohorts, athletics, looking at what the tests will tell us, because again, now we're looking at staff testing results of not just symptomatic people, but people who also don't display any symptoms. So in our next slide, our goal and our intention is to do everything in our power to bring back our students and staff as soon as possible and do it under the safest conditions. To do this, we're looking at weighing the risk against the benefits. Of course, the risk that we face is that one of our students or staff members become seriously ill and worse, die from COVID under our care. The benefit that we may gain is that students will learn in the best environment, which we all agree and no doubt have that it's in person. To look at these factors, we backwards map to establish targets or milestones for various scenarios. And again, these weeks and pathways are only done to establish the way we're thinking about the different times of the year that we can do this work. It's not meant to be set in stone or followed through in this order that it's displayed here, but more as a thought process for you to consider. So we will recalibrate every Tuesday, as Susan Klein-Rothschild has said. Next Tuesday, we expect it'll be, we were hoping this Tuesday was gonna be red, which would get us to a goal of opening. If we continue in a trajectory of moving along these risk levels or moving our data appropriately, we were hoping that we could open by November 2nd, with giving ourselves 3 weeks in between. And again, we picked these dates to show what happens during the months of November and December, because as you can see from this display on pathway 2, we need to consider spreader events like upcoming November holiday Veterans Day, and of course the Thanksgiving week, which will, as I'm learning Santa Barbara community and observing what happens during holidays, we are a city that receives many visitors during holidays. And I wanted to just make sure that you saw these upcoming events along with the winter break in December. So as I said in our previous slide, as a superintendent, I'm approaching the decision from seeing what the virus is doing in the community, but I'm also looking at feasibility of the resources that we have. And I'm looking at 4 things: our staffing, our families' preferences for in-person or distance learning, our facilities, and our budget for our safety precautions. When it comes to staffing, we will continue to conduct staff testing and provide staff who are unable to return to work options for their employment. When it comes to family preferences for in-person or distance learning in the coming days, we will be contacting our families, reaching out to them when we get to the appropriate level to find out what is their preference for their child's return to in-person school. As you may recall, last meeting, I reported that our results overall showed that 50% of our staff, of our parents preferred distance learning or were not recommending us to come back. And so it's a 50-50 split between our families. For every email that I get that says, please open schools, I get an email that says, please don't open schools yet. When we look at our facilities, we are continuing to train our staff to assess the facilities for ventilation. Susan Klein Rothschild, in our morning meeting with superintendents across our county, talked about this, the fact that the virus, Susan, can you repeat that part about where the virus lives and what we need to think about the ventilation in the classrooms for this part for me, please?
Sure. So one of the things we're most concerned about is the virus spreads person to person, and it spreads in droplets and through the air. So indoors is much more concerning. And if there's a ventilation system that moves air around, that is not helpful if it's recirculated air, because you could be moving the droplets more. So we really want to look at making sure that we have good ventilation systems, or we open doors and windows, or we're outside. So that's a very important thing before we have indoor classrooms.
Thank you for that, Susan. And as board members, as we continue to analyze, we're concurrently analyzing and we're concurrently learning as updates happening and as we start to open up slowly. The virus, as you know, doesn't abide by our color coding system, the county's boundaries or groups of people. We've seen disproportionate infections in our communities of color, particularly Latino, Black families, and those living in poverty. And those are things that I also need to take into consideration, looking at the demographics of our district. Some have asked why we can't do what our surrounding school district superintendents are doing. And I'd like to remind us that the design challenges that I face as a superintendent with the largest school district in this county are very different from those of a school superintendent whose organization is smaller, who have less staff to contend with, higher budgets to be able to put in place many of the additional needed safety precautions. And we all are looking and assessing risk slightly different, but we are collaborating, we are talking to each other. I'm very pleased to hear Susan Klein Rothschild's report about the cost of testing staff, the changes that are coming when it comes to the different tests that will be available. And we want to be able to also look at how we look at our maintenance staff and their ability to continue with the sanitation and cleaning process as we bring in these small groups. So with that, board members, I'm recommending that we keep an eye on the target of January 19th as the date that we begin to bring back students for in-person instruction, either in hybrid or full in-person, depending on the tiers that we're in. Of course, if we're orange or yellow before the holiday break, we may consider other options that you like to bring to our cabinet. But with that said, I'd like to end this presentation with our next slide, which is that we know that there is a goal. Our goal is to have our students experience in-person instruction as soon as possible. And if the plan doesn't work, we're willing to change the plan. Thank you. And we're open for questions.
Thank you so much to the team, the entire team. So Ms. Garcia, I know that we have a handful of speakers.
We want to move on to the speakers?
Yes, please, that'd be great. So I think we have roughly 10, is that correct? On this agenda item?
Yes, around there. So I will be calling out the first 5 speakers. If you can please be ready and unmute yourself when it's time to talk. The first 5 speakers will be Sunita Beal, Caroline Hara, Roseanne Crawford, Harriet Chilton, and Anton Chilton. So we'll start with Sunita Beal. Sunita, can you hear us?
Okay, I can mute myself now. Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, board members. My name is Sunita Beal. I'm a medical doctor at UCSB and a parent to 2 children, a 9th grader and an 11th grader in the district. I would like to express my medical opinion in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic. These pandemic conditions are going to exist for at least the next 2 years. This virus is persistent, and right now we do not have a way to eliminate it entirely. So when we discuss pandemic school plans, we are not just talking about this academic year, but the following year through 2022, 2 entire academic years. So our school reopening plan needs to be a sustainable long-term plan, which brings students back to in-person learning now, even with the virus in our midst, since this will be our future for an extended amount of time. We have also learned that there are simple but very effective ways to be safe from the virus. Physical distance, good ventilation, good hygiene that prevents us from carrying the virus from our hands to our mouths, barriers such as face shields and plexiglass, and the use of masks are all methods that are strong barriers to infection. We are seeing that in our own community, that with these safety measures in place, people are not being infected. Distance learning was meant to be a stopgap short-term measure, but 2 years is not what I would consider short-term. Our children are not old enough to be treated like college students. They need to be directly engaged. It's time for us to all be realistic about our expectations. COVID-19 is expected to surge this fall, and the reopening status can be expected to swing between the red tier and the orange tier over the next
30
6
seconds.
I expect that it will not be possible to maintain a certain tier for 3 weeks. And my concern is that with this plan that sets up 3-week intervals, that we won't be able to actually ever get to in-person learning. I would like the board to consider a modified hybrid plan that allows more of our children to be in school now and not in the uncertain future. Thank you.
We will now hear from Caroline Hara. Caroline, can you hear us?
Hi, I just got the unmute.
Perfect. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Caroline Hara, lead organizer of Santa Barbara Parent Leadership Action Network. As you are likely aware, SB Plan seeks to improve academic, social, emotional, and physical outcomes for K-12 youth. We do this through information and by mobilizing parents to take constructive action to support their children, our community, and as we work together to overcome the impact of COVID-19. Several weeks ago, SB Plan invited several speakers on the front lines of mental health to a mental wellness panel. Elena Walczak, CEO of Calm, noted that the effects of a natural disaster bottom out about 9 months post-disaster, or this December. This is when our regular coping skills start to fail, and when we might expect the biggest mental health crisis to hit our community. Feedback from our parents, their children and friends, and our community shows that many are at a breaking point. Our children need human connection, they need physical activity, they need art, music, they need joy. Fortunately, the data provided today indicates the small cohorts can proceed, not just for sports, but for many, many other activities, and they can proceed now. Parents are eager to support the district in getting our children back to school in small cohorts, and certainly no later than January 19th. We can do this if we work together. I will be personally calling you next week to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Roseanne Crawford. Roseanne, can you hear us?
There we go. I only now just got the permission to unmute. Can you please clear up some confusion? I was confirmed to speak both in general public comment and this item, and I got skipped, and so did others that received confirmation. Am I going to be able to also address public comment at one time, or should I just speak to this subject now? What do you recommend?
You can do both, Ms.
Okay.
Crawford. Yeah.
How about if I start with just this F1 since it's pertinent, and then I'll make a short, very short public.
Oh, no. Ideally, you just speak to F1 right now. That's the way this is the agenda.
Right.
And then when we get a public comment on non-agenda items, you can speak again then.
Lovely. Thank you for clarifying. Good evening. While 24 local schools not part of SBUSD have applied for waivers and are opening and currently in the review process to open, our numbers are really looking good. We only had 23 hospitalized, 4 in intensive care, And I think it's very admirable, Superintendent Maldonado, that the most challenged are being addressed by allowing them to attend back on campus in cohorts of 14. I just think that's wonderful. But the fact of the matter is, every family is challenged with the virtual instruction. I personally don't understand sports. If sports can go, why aren't we in cohorts for everyone? And you did mention that 50% of the people want to be in person. What's wrong with leaving those people in virtual and taking those 50%? They automatically are a cohort based on the size of our classes. I thought that was the next step. So there's volunteers with teachers' aides, UCSB, Westmont, City College. There's a way to do this and to do this safely. And I really hope that you would consider moving. Time is critically of every second counts at this moment. Thank you for that. Now, as far as public comment, I'd really like to thank on behalf of the Coalition of Neighborhood Schools.
Time.
Didn't you give me a public comment that I could do? I'm going into the next one. You said I could follow with that.
No, it would be best if you spoke to non-agenda items when the rest of the
okay, I'll hold it for non-agenda.
We'll bring it back. We'll bring it back up. Is that okay?
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Harriet Chilton. Harriet, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm a student at San Marcos High School, and I'm in the theater program with Shannon Sala, our director. And we've been informed that sports are able to go back and practice in small groups. And I was just wondering why theater does not fall into that category of sports. And we've requested to work in groups of 2 or 3, which is smaller. So I'm wondering if you've considered that the performing arts and the theater aspect can go back as well as sports. And I'd just like you to consider that theater is, in its own sense, a sport as well. And I just think that you should consider that theater goes back as well. As a lot, me personally and a lot of kids, it's our outlet and it's our resource and it's what we like to do. And for a lot of us, we will continue to do that in the future. And I think that if sports are going back, then theater as well should be able to go back, and we should be able to practice with the same circumstances that sports are as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Anton Chilton. Anton, can you hear us?
Yep, thank you very much. You time your question as to can you hear us very well with the unmute message coming through. So just as a note, you might extend that question by 5 seconds. So you just heard from my daughter. I'm really just going to add to her argument, which is we see and hear about the sports groups being able to come back in the limited format, which of course we accept and understand. What's incredibly frustrating and difficult to understand is how that same criteria can't apply to the performing arts. They could take exactly the same types of precautions, could work in exactly the same types of groups. And it just makes me wonder why we haven't had their needs considered. I know this is a sweeping generalization, but generally kids in performing arts are often in a minority group, and this is, to my daughter's point, a big outlet for them. I also know it's very important from listening to Harriet and her friends that they get the opportunity to get together and interact as an outlet, especially in this very difficult and challenging time. And so I just asked the question, why the difference and why the different treatment? It's very puzzling to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call the next 5 speakers. I have Karen Mcbride, Peggy Wilson, Moni, Kim Barron, and Sunita Beal. So we'll start with Karen McBride. Okay, Karen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. So I want to talk a little bit about communication and the role of community in what we're facing here. And I want to say that to anybody who's listening, whether you're one of the members of Santa Barbara Teachers Association, a community member or school board member or a staff person, there has been robust communication between the union and the district going on since last spring. It's not always perfect, and I think that we have seen that this is a wild ride we're on. You know, there's ups and downs, things are always changing, and sometimes I get information from somebody at the district that changes 4 days later, or vice versa. So it's not easy, and I totally respect the work that is being done by my members as well as all of the people that are in the meeting tonight. But the one thing that I realized is that as we're moving towards small cohorts, is that while I participated in a process throughout the summer that was based on the science and the guidelines from the state and the county health departments, I'm not sure if our staff knows the details behind the attestation process and all of the things that had to take place in order for campuses to reopen, even for the limited activities that are going on now. So I would appreciate more information released to staff members about that. And then I just want to thank you for basing your ideas on science and including Ms. Klein-Rothschild in the process. And I know we're going to have to do a lot more adjusting as we go forward. And so I appreciate robust communication about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next we have Peggy Wilson. Peggy, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, schools being closed. I looked today on the latest COVID news, and there was one death, 70 years old, and of course he had comorbidities. And I just feel like if you got, I mean, honestly, this is a virus. There's other states that are open. Dr. Sunita Beal and Caroline Hara, I think, are hitting it on the head that there is so much fear for these kids. Suicide is a huge issue. Isolation, depression. I don't even think you're looking at that really carefully. And from that young gal, Chilton, she wants to be on campus. I think many people want to be on campus, and you should be really moving towards small cohorts or making, let parents decide what is best for them. And then as a school, you guys are getting paid, your government paid, and, I just feel that's your job. You should be doing that. Also, it's kind of interesting, California is $82 billion in debt. This is a stat. And by the schools being closed, you're saving $18 billion. I don't know if that's coming down from Newsom, because this is just a great way to keep you guys being paid and, to kind of salvage the state. But I don't know what's going to happen here, but kids need to get back to school. And I personally don't know one person personally that has COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Moni. Moni, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry. Thank you
Great.
very much. And yeah, I do want to emphasize that these are very strange times, and I'm sure you are doing, considering, and we certainly have to consider the teachers. I believe this isn't just anybody's job. There's health and safety reasons, but I strongly agree with the comments of the doctor early on, and just want to say that I haven't heard as much talk about the use of outdoors and masks, because that combination, as well as, the hand washing, other things, for a certain portion, like the middle school and that age, and insisting on the mask, because it's much lower risk. And I think it may allow us to have more people back, particularly special ed like instruction, and work with the 50% that want to come back. So I just wanted to say maybe we could consider that, because it's less risk while we figure out the ventilation for the buildings. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We will now hear from Kim Barron. Kim, can you hear us?
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
I should know how to unmute. That's what I talk to kids about all day. You can hear me now, I assume. So good evening. I'm a teacher in the district speaking tonight about my continuing concerns about in-person learning, as well as the lack of communication to teachers and staff. We've gotten emails about topics ranging from being tested to some teachers having to go back to campus to teach small cohorts. These emails are put out with little details. For example, we are emailed that we have to have mandatory testing for staff, but it is a day or two later that details are given because of questions or concerns. The same with the cohorts. Who is going to teach them? When will we be notified? More thought needs to go into how this communication is affecting your employees. We are relying on board meetings to find out what is happening and what is going to happen. Why not let us know beforehand, as we are your employees? I personally have asked many times about the HVAC units in our classrooms, so I'm glad that you addressed this tonight, and I look forward to hearing what's going to be done to make them safe. And it hasn't been communicated if we're going to do surveillance testing on students like LAUSD is doing, so I'd like to know if we are and why or why not. We all want to go back to our schools when it's safe to do so, and I applaud our superintendent not rushing into this. Districts across the country have reopened schools only to have to close them again. Scientists warn of what may come when flu season and COVID converge, and we need to consider that when making plans. Clear, more thoughtful communication between administration and staff will go a long way to making a stressful situation more manageable. Thank you for your time and your hard work in considering the mental and physical health of your employees. And by the way, I do know several people who have had COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Britt Andreata. Britt, can you hear us?
Yes, you might want to start unmuting the next speaker when the previous speaker is talking, because by the time you're asking us, we hear you, the button hasn't shown up yet. And my name wasn't called in those 5, but here I am. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to all the teachers and the board members. We know you're working very hard. I'm here to represent the parents of the kids who are in the Outburst Performance Choir at La Colina. As you know, this is a competitive process. This is a competitive show choir, and the students went through a very rigorous audition process to be selected. There's only 28 students in the choir, and some of these kids have been working forward to this experience since 1st grade. We would like to be considered as equal to athletics in terms of importance. We know that the arts oftentimes get undervalued and don't receive their fair share or treated as equally as athletics, but we believe that because of the competitive nature where our students will be representing the school and the school district, it should be treated as a competitive activity. In addition, singing and theater are actually disadvantaged in the Zoom environment because Zoom prioritizes one audio track. Students cannot harmonize with each other. They cannot sing together on Zoom because it only allows one voice to come through. It mutes the rest. And in addition, the singing cannot sync because of little delays. So this activity is actually not equal in the Zoom environment as other sources of instruction are. So we would really like to ask that starting as soon as you can, that the choirs be allowed to come back to campus under the same rules as athletics, doing activity outside, standing 10 feet apart, masks on, all that kind of stuff. Even if this could only happen once a week or every other week, it would be hugely helpful and inspiring and rewarding to the students who work so hard to earn this achievement through their competitive audition process. Thank you so much.
Ms. Garcia, does that conclude?
Yes.
Well, thanks to our speakers. Thanks to everybody. So now, just so we understand the flow, now the board has a chance to ask questions and dive into this a bit more. And then when we're concluded with this agenda item, we're going to move back to the agenda and to public, for those of you who are here for public comment for non-agenda items, of which there are 10 of you. So with that, thank you to our speakers. Thanks to the staff and to Susan Klein Rothschild for being here, and again, not 11 p.m., but actually a much better hour. And now any board members, if you have questions, I'm sure you do, take it away, Dr. Reed.
Thank you. I first wanted to say how much I appreciate all of the public comment tonight. And I think everyone brings up really important points and suggestions and things to consider. And actually, I really appreciate that in terms of the way I'm thinking right now. It's provided me with a lot of thoughtful thinking and mindfulness around, you know, what you're bringing forward. So I want to first clarify and sort of ask Susan Klein-Rothschild, and I just have to say I really appreciate your guidance and the information you provide. It's so enlightening and so informative. And so I want to go back to what you said at our last board meeting, and that was if there is an outbreak of one or up to 1 to 3 students, that even if we go back into the red or purple, let's say we move into the next phase after red, that we would not be closing schools, that we would not be closing the district and going back to remote learning. That what I understood you saying was that even if we were to regress to those other phases, that what would happen would be an increase of testing that would be provided in that next level to ensure that we were able to sort of, with our contact tracing, really pinpoint the ones that were COVID, you know, positive, and that we were able to isolate that and be able to move forward. So is that still true? And if you could answer that.
Yes, that is accurate. That is our understanding of the guidance from the California Department of Public Health. If we have one positive COVID case, we close the classroom, the cohort of the people in that case, for 14 days. They go into quarantine. If we have 3 or more cases within 14 days that aren't part of the same household, then we may have to take stronger action. If we have up to 5% of the school involved, it may look at closing the school. But the state has said, we don't want to swing back and forth between in-person and remote learning. That's so difficult for children. So if we get to the point where we're ready to, and we've taken the precautions to open in-person instruction, we want to simply increase the surveillance testing, the routine testing, and the activities we take to respond immediately when there is a case and isolate and limit transmission. That's why we want to be thoughtful about this process. And I appreciate that you're taking the time to do that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you just reiterating that information. So with that knowledge, and if we were to move forward in the phases based on, I think it's the excellence of really looking at how we can be wearing our masks and really, as a community, really making a difference. It's really apparent. But that when we move to that next phase, that we potentially could be moving to in October, it seems that I've heard from a lot of parents, the concern is, and also the superintendent, in that we have 50% of the parents that are interested in having their students go back, and we have 50% potentially of not wanting students to go back. And so if we're continuing to survey the parents, and I would also include in this teachers, the teachers who are interested or willing to come back and can come back based on their own situations, and those who can't, that if we enter the next phase, would it be, is it a consideration that those students of parents who want their students to come back into the school and those teachers who are interested in coming back and being involved in that level, could we come back in that way? Could it, instead of just a blanket, this is how we're going forward, but that we could really make it a choice dependent on parents and teachers?
So from a state standpoint, we're following the state guidance. The school districts can make choices, and you can give parents choices about having remote throughout a longer period of time. It is a challenge to match up what the parents want and what the teachers want and make that work with different views. And so I think the superintendent would have different ideas on that.
So we have talked at length about this question, Dr. Reed, when it comes to 50% saying yes and 50% no. And in my comments, I was trying to illustrate that families' preferences, you know, as a parent, they need to consider what their assessment of their own children's risk is, whether they have underlying conditions, what is happening with the community. And then, of course, they need to rely on our guarantee of our schools being safe places for their children to come back to. So those are some of the things that I would think from a parent perspective I would consider. Now, as a school district, we need to think about who are the 50% that are going to stay home? Are they all the same school in the same grade, requiring the same sorts of supports? If they're in elementary, for example, we could end up with multi-age, multi-grade classrooms if we offered that option where 50% stay in and 50% stay out. We can't predict what that will look like. And so those are some of the things we need to consider. In junior high and high school, we talked about this today, Susan, at our meeting. If, for example, there are questions about how do we contend with trying to keep kids in cohorts? In a junior high and high school, they are all over the place. Their electives, we could keep a cohort in core classes, but when it comes to an elective class, for example, they'll need to go to mixed groups. So it is not going to be a perfect science when it comes to matching students and teachers if we allow for 50% and 50%, 50% in person and 50% in distance learning. It will require additional staffing.
So it will acquire additional staffing. I guess I'm just curious as to what, what process would you go through to just sort of analyze that to really understand if it would, if it would be such a large group of mixed students. I mean, honestly, mixed grade level students being mixed together is actually, has positive achievement too in groupings. So I'm not sure what the extreme would be in terms of those groupings.
Absolutely. So we would need to, again, resurvey our parents and have them give us firm answers as to whether or not they're going to be coming back. As a principal, I always used to say, kids don't come in perfect packages of 24 or perfect packages of 32, and their needs are varied. So we have to consider all of those individual needs as we design a two-tiered system of instruction, in person, in distance, and what will that look like? And those are things we are trying to figure out what are ways that we can plan for such an event. And so the contingency planning continues on internally.
Great. I mean, I think that's really what maybe these public comments are saying, and what I'm suggesting is that we just are nimble in thinking about how we might move forward and not just relegate it that we're going to wait till everybody comes to a consensus, because that may not happen, but really looking at maybe really having to think outside the box in some respects. So I'm just bringing that as a point to think about and consider. The second thing I wanted to bring up also was in terms of the rigidity of the teachers in their practice, for example, junior high, where they're required to have their students be in remote learning for 4 hours, let's just say, which I guess is the case. Is that true? They're required to be on remote learning for 4 hours?
I will ask Dr. Carey to address that question.
They're required to have 240 minutes of instructional time, 240 instructional minutes. It does not have to be in real-time direct interface with the teacher. So sometimes we use the word synchronous and asynchronous, but I know those are, sort of, to many years, that's educational jargon, but really what it means is synchronous learning is where I'm the teacher and I'm with my 32 students and we're doing something all together. Asynchronous could be anything from students working independently, students working in small groups via the Zoom platform, or it could even be students working off of Zoom on assignments that are under the supervision of the credentialed teacher and for which there will be accountability later on. So what we expect of teachers is that they be accountable during the learning blocks time. The junior high schedule specifically has 3 80-minute learning blocks daily, with half the periods happening one day and the subsequent day has the remaining periods. But that doesn't mean 80 minutes of teacher with 32 students, followed by another 80 minutes like that.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because in a conversation that I had with a teacher, she was concerned that the way she was being told was that it needed to be within the 4 hours. She had to be doing this remote, synchronous teaching, and I was like, well, that's hard for me to believe. Only that in the work that I've done, nobody can sit there and do that for 4 hours. So the idea that you're suggesting that it's a creative opportunity for teachers to develop their program with their students that can be synchronous and asynchronous, which means they can be on task on Zoom, and they can go off in a breakout room, or perhaps go watch a video, or maybe read text and then return. Or there are like a flipped classroom provided with reading in advance, then they come back and they have the analysis of it, then they come back into a breakout. There's many options and flexibility, and that it's not just this rigid requirement, because as teachers, as in my experience, we need to be flexible. And in that moment, what is the best teaching moment that we can be doing? And we can see whether students are engaged or not. So I appreciate that comment. And I think what that leads me to is the next question in terms of teachers. Then if they are feeling that they don't have that flexibility, wouldn't it be best for them to connect with the principal and sort of their PLCs and come up with a plan or framework that could provide them with more flexibility and maybe more professional development around these types of asynchronous work and synchronous teaching, so that that they feel that they're doing the best for their students in their teaching experience?
We did circle back around on this a couple weeks ago with our junior high principals, and we normed around some guidance and extended that to teachers to help clarify multiple options for how we can approach those 80-minute blocks. So I'm not sure when your conversation with the teacher was, but I would hope that that has helped, that effort in the last 2 weeks, to further clarify something we'd also identified as a bit of a disconnect. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It actually was yesterday, so maybe this is just going to broaden, open the door for further conversation, which I think is what this is all about. And I don't want to hog my time, but I just wanted one more comment, and that is I really appreciate the comments around drama and music and art. I mean, music for me was really, really vital, and that engagement of music was how I really made it through in my experience through school. And so I understand, I'm not sure where that goes, but I think the voices are heard that, why sports versus drama or music. And I'm just sort of curious, is that a consideration, or is that just going to be a part of the process of returning back in these phased colors that we're facing?
I think I can answer that question for you from the state. The California Department of Public Health sets out guidance, and in Santa Barbara County, we follow the state's guidance. And the state set out guidance about youth sports that allowed youth to come back for sports with specific guidelines. They specifically said no musical instruments, no singing, no extensive drama, specifically because of the science, that when you vocalize, when you raise your voice, that expands the air droplets. And some of the worst cases of transmission are through activity where people were singing, even in space and even outside. So that wasn't just based upon an activity that was preferred or not preferred. It was really based on the science. Another question I just want to share, people are asking, why not come back in-person school now? I just want to make sure everyone knows that this California Department of Public Health and the state are saying no K through 12 schools can come back for in-person instruction outside of the small cohorts or the elementary school waivers. So when we reach the point where the transmission rate, the COVID case rate is lower, it's safer. If we look at where schools opened up and where they had a lot of outbreaks or had to close again, those were in communities when COVID was widespread. So the less COVID we have in our community, the safer it is to bring our kids back for instruction, which is why we really want to get everyone in our community using the face coverings, using the physical distance. So no one has permission to open classes for in-person instruction outside of the small cohorts and outside of the elementary school waivers. And there are strict guidelines about those, and they're all reviewed in depth. The musical instruments, singing, yelling, vocalizing loudly is not allowed for scientific reasons. And I would say, in terms of the questions about staff and not knowing what's expected and all that's been done, there's been a lot of work at each kind of business, every school, every work to prepare. And I would urge everyone to go to the public health website where it says reopening your business. Read what the guidance is. See what every school needs to do. It's extensive. We don't want anyone coming back when it's not safe, and we want everyone taking protection. So I just wanted to make sure folks knew those things.
Thank you so much. And I think just clarifying that this is a public health initiative that has come down around the music and that's news to me. So I think that's really important to hear why we're doing it in the way and the processes that we're doing it. And so thank you. That really is helpful for me to understand. Thanks for the time to ask these questions.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Other board members have questions or comments? Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your public comments. Certainly those questions that asked Dr. Reed, and thank you, Susan Rothschild, for being here and clarifying all this information. And so I appreciate this time, certain about this, obviously, conversation. And so my couple questions are, and one's a comment more, that as we're preparing to either come back fully in person, and that may look hybrid in terms of 50% staying, or however we need to do that in a two-tiered system, it's also how do we respond to if the community goes back to a widespread, or we go back steps? So does that mean that we're going to close our schools back down and we have to start back over? So what does that mean?
Our goal is to continue to decrease the COVID rate. If it starts to go up, we're going to get tighter. We're going to be testing more frequently. So we're talking about the estimate of adults being tested every 2 months on a routine basis when they don't have symptoms. It may be even more frequent that we find the cases of COVID when people are asymptomatic, so we stop it. We're going to respond very timely. When anyone has symptoms, this is one of those times when you can't say, well, I just have a little cold. You don't go to work, you don't go to school. We have to be extra protective. We have to keep people out, we have to quarantine. Those things are going to help us stop the transmission. And that's what's most important. We will do everything we can. And I believe the state has said this directly, and we'll have to see how it goes, making sure that we don't go up and down and change from in-person to remote. That's so difficult on staff and on students. We need continuity. We need something predictable. And we talked about mental health. That's a big issue. We want to give students something to look forward to and be able to continue that in-person instruction when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, and then I would just say it feels like we're going slow to go fast. We got to be cautious and to get, ultimately where we're trying to go. And my next question is, I'm not sure how, so as a board, when we're eventually coming back to having our board meetings in person, how are other governing bodies being tested? How is that working?
So in terms of the testing requirement is for all adult staff who work in schools. So it's bus drivers, it's cafeteria workers, it's teachers, it's anyone who either has contact with students or with other adults in a school setting. It's only if somebody is isolated, like they're telecommuting, they don't need to be tested. At this point in time, there's no requirement for testing students. And there's kind of mixed perceptions about this. Even on the CDC website, they recommend against it because of the way students carry symptoms. I don't know how many average colds a young child has over the winter and what this could mean. So they're actually not recommending testing of students at this point in time outside of residential boarding schools. It's something we need to watch and monitor. And hopefully if we all take those behaviors and actions and we do the testing, we'll see how this goes. And I would say to you, I think you've all said it, this is a changing situation. So what I'm saying tonight is what we know now, and it may change with time.
Okay, so when we decide to come back in person, we should be tested before we get back into our in-person meetings as board.
That's not currently a requirement. Okay. I would say it's not a good idea. And especially if we have the testing available, like the saliva testing that's easy, it's helpful. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, good questions. Ms. Ford or Ms. Munoz? I saw Ms. Munoz first.
Let's see. Okay, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I certainly, my day job is working at SenCal Health. And so, certainly speak to folks that are at higher risk, for COVID, and then of course are worried about flu season, which is coming up. So, just a little pitch about wearing masks, washing your hands, and taking any precaution that will help us so that we can go for the gold, as a district. I'm certainly supportive of, I appreciate, the collaboration with public health and also the support for the families of both employees and students, living in close quarters where it's hard to self-isolate. And I know that, that public health gives guidance on that. So I appreciate that. And hopefully, as the community moves through the tiers, we can go back to school. I just want to emphasize that as a board member, as a school district, what we want, our ultimate goal is for the students to be able to be in school in a safe manner. So I guess it's more of just a, in terms of what our plan is, it has my full support, and I appreciate the cabinet and the superintendent and Susan Klein-Rothschild in terms of all the work that's going on behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Ms. Ford. Thank you so much. First, I feel compelled to say that I feel blessed and really lucky that I haven't had COVID-19. And I am grateful to all of you who are working hard to protect me and other old people like me and others who are vulnerable and have serious health concerns. I am so grateful to those in the community who are working hard on this, and just wanted to say it. I also love seeing photos of students working out outside on the fields because it tells me that it's really happening and it really can help it happen. So this gives me hope. But Susan, I have a question for you. At the last meeting, I expressed my concern that there were some sport groups which were already doing lots of things and started earlier probably than they should have. And it created doubt that in our district's intent to open up sports, for example. So I wondered if you have had any discussions at Public Health about the supervision of area schools who received waivers, who are opening. Are there plans to try to oversee or supervise or ensure that those requirements are being followed according to the state guidelines? Because as it's been mentioned many times tonight, those are serious and intense and expensive guidelines.
It's true. Thank you for the question. The guidelines for youth sports are very structured. The only sports that are allowed, and this is for school sports, for recreational sports, for amateur sports, are ones in which there's 6 feet of distance between any two individuals, and they're maintained in small, stable groups. They're not sharing any equipment or supplies. They're outdoors only. So they're really fitness and conditioning. They're really fitness and conditioning activities that are allowed. And any entity that wants to do those outdoor sports has to do an attestation. And that means they need to go on the website and have a plan, and here's how we're meeting those goals. And they have to attest that they in fact are following those guidelines. The other thing that's important to know is if anyone in the public feels like they have seen somebody or a business, a school, a youth sports event that is not following the guidelines, they can report a potential violation. On that reopening your business page at the bottom, it says report a potential violation. And the public health department follows up on those. I contact each school if there's a potential violation of a school. And sometimes the school didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that, I need to change that. And sometimes that's not a fact what's happening. It may be someone who's seeing a part of something and doesn't know the whole story. So one, we have guidelines and they're very strict with youth sports and they are in place and we discuss them. 2, the entity has to test to meeting them. And 3, we have a place to report if there's a potential violation and a follow-up system to follow it. So all 3 of those are in place, whether it be youth sports or any other business that's opening. Let's say someone says, this restaurant's having indoor dining. That's not allowed by our health officer order. We will follow up. So all 3 of those mechanisms are in place to help keep people safe.
I so appreciate that answer. I guess the only other point I would make or underscore is that I think it is time for another survey. Understanding, of course, as Ms. Maldonado pointed out, that surveys actually don't always give you all the information that you need, but I do hear in the community that people want to be heard again, and things are so changing so rapidly and in such interesting ways that it will be important for us at least to figure out what people are thinking now. It might be totally different than they felt a month ago. And so I'd really support that. I also feel like we probably, at least based on the feedback I'm getting, that we probably should always have a strand that says distance learning for the rest of the year, because there are a number of students and families that are vulnerable. And I think they would feel much better if they knew that they wouldn't be put in a position of possibly being in a situation where students hadn't been tested or where there might be a health concern. So I'd love to see another strand that just says, do you want to stay in distance learning the rest of the year, and plans for that. Thanks.
We will work towards getting that in place and looking for ways that we can survey our parents for the different scenarios in our staff. Staff are being told that they are getting prepared to come back. So it'll be more around what parents' desires are when it comes to returning and what that will look like. I also want to let the board know that we have asked our school principals to be on tonight to make sure they are watching and listening, because the key here is making sure parents understand how much preparation we are putting in place to create safe environments. And clearly we need to continue to do a good job of communicating not only to our parents, but to our staff, all the things that have gone into place to get schools prepared to the best of our ability.
Excellent. I just want to underscore, thanks, that the need for another survey that's come up for me with some parents too. I think that's smart. I know that takes time and effort, but I think it's really important to do. I had, as usual, I have some questions about testing. And so Dr. Becky, I was struck with that number. You said you've already tested 400 just recently. Can you just expound on that and how the process is and how it went for everybody? Because it's obviously not something that this school district has ever administered before.
Sure. Well, I would say day one was Monday, and we had a testing window in the afternoon, mostly because of the teachers are working during most of the morning hours, and their afternoon hours they're not in synchronous learning, and so we allowed them to use that part of their workday to go get tested. The first day was because of the forms, there was some lines, so it was long wait times on the first day. Today was very smooth, and I think there was no more than 13 cars in the line today, so we kind of had it dialed in today. And then we're going to make preparations for next week. We'll do another 400, roughly 400 cohort, and we will have some protocols in place so that we avoid the long wait times. We've extended the hours, for example, of the lab to be there so that we have a little bit longer window each day. And what happens is they pull up in the car at the Armory off of Quarantina Street. They pull in and give their forms that are already, this was the trick on Monday, the forms weren't always filled out by everyone. And so that slowed the process so much that we got backed up. So if the forms are filled out, they hand the forms over, they do the test. I sat there and timed it. It was about a minute, probably took a minute to hand the forms and do the test and leave. So it's pretty efficient. It's a anterior swab. I think they call it that. I'm not sure, Susan, if they call it an anterior swab. It's not the one that goes very deep into the nasal cavity. And so that's the process. I'm not sure if you have any other specific questions about it.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, so that means that's the lab that we contracted out, which is the same lab that Montecito Union is using. Is that correct?
I'm not too sure who Montecito Union is using, but it is a lab that's being used by several districts in the county that I know of.
But just to clarify, to paint the picture for me, so it's not our staff that's actually doing no. Okay, great. Excellent. And then when it comes to the results, the New York Times had this article, a parent asked me about it as well, and I read it. There's been a challenge with schools and kids getting COVID with the reporting of data. So can you just clarify, it was on the slide that we're going to be transparent and make sure, but if there is a positive test, can you walk through how that is known? I really want to make sure that obviously everybody involved needs to know, but also that data gets tracked, because we're, you know, for our state, like tracking this as we go to open schools and to see how this all works. And there's been glitches across the country, and including in California, about how that data is shared.
Yeah, there's really two sides to the reporting, I believe, and maybe Ms. Klein-Rothschild can comment to this, but the employee does fill out a form to be able to release that information. They have to do that. It's one of the forms they fill out. And we do have access to the portal, so we can, the school district at least will know when there's a positive case. I believe the lab has an obligation to report their positive cases, and maybe more than that, to County Public Health, but Ms. Klein-Rothschild, can you speak to that?
Any lab that does COVID testing, they put the results in the California system. It's called CalReady. It's an automated system. Any positive test must be put in by the lab, and every local public health department gets notified. That's how we know to begin contact tracing. Here in Santa Barbara County, we're beginning the contact tracing within 1 to 2 days after getting that positive result, so we can move quickly. So it happens in Santa Barbara County and every other county in the state. Every lab must put it in that same statewide system.
Thanks for affirming that. I think it's an important point. Well, great. I hope it continues to go well. And I think it's, again, just important to communicate that the testing's already happening, and we're preparing for when we actually are testing our entire community, now just starting with these cohorts. So speaking of cohorts, I had a couple questions about cohorts. To clarify, you know, we've been in this kind of purple purgatory, which I think has created a lot of anxiety, not in addition to the fact that it means widespread, but also just being kind of so close to red. Can you confirm for me, Superintendent Maldonado, we move forward with cohorts regardless if we even, for some reason, we don't move to the red next week, we're still moving forward with cohorts? I honestly can't recall how that works.
That is correct. We have been given the green light from public health to bring back small cohorts.
Okay, I just want people to understand that, because I do get, again, a lot of frustration and anxiety, and all very understandable. Like, why are they still closed? We are beginning to bring back students starting the 29th, and we've already done it with sports, but those cohorts will proceed even if, God forbid, we stay in this purple zone for another little while, which I hope we don't.
And I think it's important, you know, Susan said it earlier, it does feel I can understand why the public feels confused. You're not opening schools, but you're bringing back athletics. You don't have classroom instruction, but you have childcare in the school site. And so again, this is the way it's happening, and we're doing the best that we can to explain it, but I can understand why it's confusing to the public. And I think Susan spoke to it earlier. We are going to open small cohorts during a purple widespread. But again, we're controlling it, and we're trying to be very thoughtful and methodical about the way it's done. And I think that's the difference between bringing everybody back and just kind of praying it all works, but actually being very methodical. Susan, would you like to add to that?
I think one thing that's helpful to keep in mind, when you say small cohort, you're talking about no more than 16 people, and they're the same people that are together. So the same children and same adults. And those children and adults don't interact with anyone else. You can't go from one cohort to another. So if you have one person in that cohort who's positive for COVID, only the other 14 to 15 people in that group have to be quarantined. If you had people going across cohorts or commingling or larger groups, you could have literally hundreds of people quarantining, and it would really sabotage the effectiveness. So the state did this piece that said, we know how hard it is for some students in particular to do the remote learning, some with severe needs, some with language needs. So this is targeted and specialized services in very small groups to help prevent the spread, but also help them not fall so far behind. So it is thoughtful. It is not always 100% consistent, but that's the thinking behind it.
And how would that work in, I get it, in elementary school. But how would that work in secondary, in junior high and high school? How would you keep kids in a cohort?
Well, I think I'll comment on that. In the small cohorts, regardless, kindergarten, preschool through 12th grade, the small cohorts are contained. Once we get into hybrid learning, when we talk, that's why when we say, you know, if one person is infected in a cohort, well, in high school or junior high, that's 4 to 6 classes, 4 to 6 cohorts that those students are in. So it's going to look much different infection-wise if we have that happen in secondary school versus elementary. And that's one thing that we have to contend with that our partner districts do not, because they're elementary schools. So one more little piece to the puzzle. But all that to say that we are going to be getting all the information out very quickly on the precautions that we've taken. We feel very confident about what we've done to protect these, not just the small cohorts that are coming out, but when we go into hybrid and ultimately full opening. But the small cohorts help us sort of practice. It's like a soft opening of a business, right? Not that we're practicing on the students or the staff, but rather we can really make sure that we're doing things correctly and keeping students safe.
Actually, I heard one athletic director say slow roll. I thought that kind of was a good way to think about it. Thank you on cohorts, and I'm excited. I guess I just you know, you'll stay in touch with us, but this is before we meet again, these cohorts will be back actually in the classroom. So speaking of classroom, my last question is just what's happening with the tents, with canopies, with plans for outdoor learning. I'm such an advocate for it. I know there's a strong support throughout the community and within the staff here. So where are we on preparation for outdoor utilization of spaces?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, Meg, you could just tell us about the supplies, but the planning will be separate. Mm-hmm.
Sure. The tents, the smaller tents, first of all, Steve Vizzolini went out to every principal and located where they thought the tents could go. The small tents are here and they're ready to go up. The larger tents will be here, I believe, in October. So that's the update on the tents.
Wow. So they'll be constructed in October.
Yes. And
yeah, they're here. So the point is they're here. That's amazing news. I think that would be great to see some visuals at the time when it's right. I know a friend sent me a visual of a school somewhere else, but with the imagination can work here to make sure, you know, to utilize these spaces in really creative ways. So I'm excited for that.
And we'll continue to plan. As Meg said, they have arrived. Principals are beginning to draft up their plans on the use of their spaces, you know, unique to their areas.
Great. Well, Dr. Reed, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that I totally agree with you, and that's exciting. I'm glad you brought that question up, Ms. Capps, about the outdoor learning, and that to know that we have these tents, and they're not closed tents, they're, you know, just covering on top, so that we truly have the ventilation. And I just wanted to make sure, and I don't think I made that maybe as aware in my comments earlier, because I was just asking the questions, just to say how much I appreciate all the work that is going into this, that what the district is doing, what the cabinet is doing, and our superintendent. And certainly, Susan, your input is just vital. We should be having you as a paid consultant on it. I don't know if you are, but we appreciate your input during these meetings. But just to acknowledge the staff, the administration, the district, the teachers, and certainly the students and the parents. It's just, it takes a village, right, in all this community. And I just want to acknowledge all of the work that's being done. And it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I see a glimmer, and I think that's really hopeful. So I feel like, go for the gold, and, that we really have to be hopeful in this process, but we have to continue, because that would be my first priority, to get everyone back. But again, Susan, when you remind us of what we need to look at, and you did clarify that the state has their requirements and they're rigid, and that we as a county cannot change those. If anything, we can make them stricter. We can't make them looser. I think I remember you saying that 2 weeks ago. So we really have to go with the guidance of the state, and then what our county decides relative to what is necessary for our community. And that is all reflected on everybody coming together and really making sure that we wear our masks and we do what we need to do to ensure the safety of everybody and the health of everyone, so that we can move forward with bringing our students back. So thank you.
Okay, I was just about to finish up, but thank you, Dr. Reed. So just on the masks front, just can you clarify, students will be wearing masks? I want to just make sure that's also known. Okay, good. These are just, there's a lot out there, a lot of questions, a lot of, again, a lot of frustration. I know this is happening, and you've reiterated it tonight. Our teachers, I mean, this is go time. We're bringing students and teachers back into the classroom. Many of the teachers have already been in classrooms that don't have students with them, but this is go time. And I just do want to express my support for as much over communication as possible with our teachers, to give them the support and make sure their questions are answered and their input is solicited. I know that's happening, so I just want to affirm that, and also just understand and show some compassion for the sensitive time it is for teachers and staff. But many staff have already been back. But the fact that students will be returning to class in small cohorts next week, and then building up to this Go for the Gold. So thanks for the organization. I thought this was an excellent report tonight, and the public comments were really helpful to answer and clarify some questions. So with that, I think we actually move on to the next agenda item. If we're good to move on from this discussion item, and we'll move back up to the agenda and go to our public comment on non-agenda items, which is item C1. I'm sorry, that's not item C1. It is, it would be item C6, public comment on non-agenda matters within the jurisdiction of the board. And Ms. Garcia, I believe that we have 10 speakers at two minutes each.
That's correct. I'll call out the 5 first names. We have Paula Casson, Alice Post, Kim Pescates, Elrod McLearn, and Lucille Boss. So we'll start with Paula Casson. I don't see Paula. We'll circle back to her. We'll go with Alice Post. Alice, can you hear us? Okay, we'll try Kim Pescates. Kim, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. SBUSD adopted resolutions regarding the demands of the Black students this past summer, and now the real work begins for our school district. You passed a resolution declaring racism as a public health emergency. The work to address racism in our school district has to go much deeper than adopting resolutions. With respect to race, the foundational issue is white supremacy culture, and we must attack the problem head on. White supremacy culture is invisible and it is toxic. White supremacy culture shuts down learning and dehumanizes BIPOC members of our district. Every level of our district, the board, administrators, teachers, staff must do deep anti-racism work to identify white fragility, microaggressions, tone policing, superiority, power hoarding, paternalism, and the list goes on. As Ida B. Wells says, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. It is time that we detox and make the invisible visible. The California Department of Education has launched an anti-racism initiative, as well as districts across the country. Anti-racism training at every level of our district must happen for any real change to occur. Without this commitment to this hard and uncomfortable work by everyone in our school district, the resolutions that have been adopted will be hollow promises. Please take concrete actions for SBUSD to undergo comprehensive anti-racism training at every level of our school district. Also, yes on Proposition 15. Thank you.
30 seconds. Thank you. We'll go for Elrod McLearn. Elrod, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
All right. So as you all know, I am running for the position of the school board. And a couple things I'd like to say. One is that I have been characterized as not agreeing with ethnic studies or wanting ethnic studies. But the truth is, I think ethnic studies are very important. However, the ethnic studies that we currently have adopted supports Black Lives Matter, which have declared their their hatred and disagreement of the nuclear family. And I am all about supporting parents of our students and fostering open communication between parents and their children. So we need to have a study and a curriculum that supports that. Also, I am a supporter and advocate of literacy, because literacy is the empowerment of the downtrodden. Literacy was the key that broke Frederick Douglass from the imprisonment of slavery and allowed him to fight for freedom for his fellow slaves. Literacy is what graduated George Washington Carver from Iowa State University as the first Black man with a bachelor's degree and helped him revolutionize agriculture. Literacy was a clarion call of Booker T. Washington, the founder of the Tuskegee Institute. These men, all former slaves, held literacy in high honor, and to strip literacy from our own children here at schools like Adelante, Cleveland, and McKinley elementary schools is to imitate those slave masters who tried to keep their slaves ignorant and in the fields. It is not political. Literacy is not a political thing. And to advocate for literacy is to be someone who supports social justice. As I said earlier, I'm running for office. I support literacy. If you want to learn more about my campaign, my website is learnwithmclearn.com. Learnwithmclearn.com. Thank you.
Sorry. Next, we have Lucille Boss. And the next 5 speakers will be Alexis Slutsky, Joel Block, Lisa Sloan, Moni, and Janet Price. So we'll go with Lucille Boss. Lucille, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good evening. First, I want to thank you for the informative presentation and the really thoughtful discussion about COVID-19 early in tonight's meeting. I think it's helpful to have that. Sometimes I go to bed before 10 p.m., so I appreciate you having it earlier. But tonight I really wanted to commend the school board for staying strong in the face of a group that intended to be destructive with our school district. I am especially grateful to a reporter who did their due diligence and provided accurate information in response to what came across as defamatory charges. But what really remains distressing to me is that the district was forced to defend itself in a suit, diverting $300,000 in funds from education in our school system. Our schools should stand for inclusivity, equity, and compassion. And I am especially proud of our school board for standing up for these values, especially in the face of such constant vitriol and threats. So I really just want to thank all of you for your strength and your service. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Alexis Slutsky. Alexis, can you hear us? Alexis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Alexis Slutsky, and really grateful for the opportunity to listen and also to speak tonight. And just very grateful for all of the care that has gone into this challenging time. So deep bows. As a community member, long time, born and raised in Santa Barbara, and an educator here, I also want to thank the district for approving the ethnic studies curriculum. And, you know, we all know that it works. It's important. It increases academic performance and attendance and more opportunities, especially for our youth and people of color. So that's clear, I think. And I just wanted to say and add my voice as a white woman here who has been able to bear witness over the years to our historical and systemic racism, and that there's no blame because we've inherited this system, but we each have an epic responsibility to really transform and bring equity now. And so just to add my voice and amplify some of the other voices that have spoken to simply having the ethnic studies curriculum is one step, but certainly there's plenty of work to do, including some of the concerns that the Ethnic Studies Coalition have brought forward in terms of having a department and qualified teachers. And I'll also add my voice to the importance for, I think, everybody, not just the educational systems, but all the systems that make up our community and our civilization to really do anti-racism training. And so I just want to encourage that and give thanks for what has been done, and to also reiterate that there's more work to be done, and Santa Barbara can be a beacon of equity and justice, and to plant a seed with all of you and all of us for imagination, because we're going to need a lot of imagination as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Joel Block. Joel, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Joel Block. I'm a high school social studies teacher in the Santa Barbara School District. As a teacher of U.S. history, I try to instill the values our founders had at the creation of our country. One of those foundational values was the idea that anyone should be allowed to speak their ideas without fear of reprisal, punishment, or personal denigration, regardless of the idea or the nature of the speaker. Civil discourse, it was believed, would lead to resolution and unity of purpose. Unfortunately, in our world today, that value seems to have been lost. Today, more often than not, the speaker and not the idea is attacked. The method seems to be that if you cannot effectively argue with the idea expressed, one should then attack the expressor of the idea and label the person with negative epithets and denounce him or her as dangerous. We have seen this happening in our own school community. Nobody argues that freedom, equal rights, or the end of racism are bad ideas. Rather, we have the following. When a person touts racial equality, the speaker might be labeled a communist. When they tout helping the poor, we hear them called socialist. And when they complain and try to rectify any systemic racism that exists, they are labeled as destroyers of society as we know it. Until we are able to sit and discourse with each other, nothing will improve, get solved, or even be truly dealt with. I urge this board to ignore any argument that focuses on the speaker and not the idea, so that we can reason together and come to resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Lisa Sloan. Lisa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Good evening, President Capps and members of the board. My name is Lisa Sloan, and I live in Goleta. At the last meeting, I addressed you regarding your staff recommendation to adopt Teen Talk over the HEART curriculum to meet the requirements of AB 329. Despite an overwhelming majority of community members and parents, including myself, who stated their opposition, you voted unanimously to approve Teen Talk. Your deafness to the concerns of the parents is why I'm telling all my friends to vote the three of you out on November 3rd. You, as board members, do a disservice to Santa Barbara area students by focusing on filling their bellies rather than educating their minds, as evidenced by 50% literacy and math proficiency scores. Where is the hope for half the students? You have failed to equip them for the future, and your performance is inexcusable. Honestly, you have earned a big fat F. That is why my friends and I will vote for Elrod McClern and Brian Campbell. Brian and Elrod care about families and about the future of this community. Please go to learnwithmclern.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Moni. Moni, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm going to try to be quick. I have two things. In the spirit of Justice Ginsburg, I want to you to be aware of the barriers to running for the board, not for me per se, but the fee. Goleta doesn't have it, and the election board said that it was a board decision, and $5,300, some of us are unemployed, and as much as $10,000. I would like the board to revisit it or respond to this, because I've done my homework and it's upsetting to me, because there are high-risk poverty people who would have gone for it but can't afford it. Second thing, you might have forgotten that next month is Dyslexia Awareness Month. I'm glad other people have picked up the thunder, but I've been at this since Joan Esposito in the 90s, and I would like it to be a civil solution focused discussion. And I'm wondering if we can bring up the resolution, and if you could speak to how you feel about the science of learning, possibly getting rid of Lucy Calkins, because these are two big areas, and if you support the things that Emily Hanford has said, because many people talk about the Matthew effect, that illiteracy, not by the third grade, impacts the poor more. So the poor get poorer, but the rich get richer, because the rich people, or people of means, I'm just saying, they can afford tutors. And this was my own personal experience. I could take care of it for my son, but I know there aren't other people, so it's an equity issue. And could somebody call me back? Because nobody's ever talked to me about this personally. So I'd love to really work on a
30
solution
seconds.
rather than just some little paltry thing. And next month, let's talk. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Janet, thank you. You're next, go ahead.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Hi, good evening, President Capps and members of the board and all who are still on this meeting. What I was going to comment on was covered at the very beginning of the meeting and resolved, but I also wanted to thank all of you for the very informative information about COVID and the whole situation. I can just tell that a lot of work has been done, and I just wanted to thank you, and I appreciate it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Roseanne Crawford, and lastly, we'll try Alice Post again. So Roseanne, can you hear us, Roseanne?
Thank you. I can hear you. Might I ask if you could please try to get Alice Post back? I promise she's not a chipmunk. If you get her, I will cede my time to her. If not, I'll take my time. It was a mute problem with the microphone, I believe.
Sure, you can both have your time, and I thank you for that offer, but you can both have
I'll let Alice go first. Please try, Alice.
One moment.
Ms. Crawford, just in the interest of time, why don't you speak, and then we can be getting Ms. Post on the phone on Zoom.
Okay, so she can have time to unmute. It says Alice Post could not be heard. So, okay, here we go. Thank you for your patience. On behalf of the Coalition for Neighborhood Schools, I want to thank Ms. Capps, Moten Sims, and Reed for their participation in the recent candidate forum, along with the candidates challenging them for change of leadership. For any that missed it or would like a copy, please email cns4schools@aol.com. That's CNS, the number 4, schools@aol.com. It is available in both English and Spanish as a YouTube. Please specify which language you would like, the link at cns4schools@aol.com, or if you would like to join our e-list. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try Miss Alice Post. Alice, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Oh, hello. I'm Alice Post, and I also wish to thank the 7 candidates. Okay, technical difficulties. Are you there? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Superintendent and I missed the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As our member Roseanne Crawford just spoke, the Coalition for Neighborhood Schools wishes to thank the 7 candidates for this SBUSD for their participation in our candidates forum last week. Over 125 citizens attended by Zoom, and we are pretty sure that not many in-person forums have ever had so many attendees. We were thrilled that each of you not only benefited from growing up with a neighborhood school, but also now support making that experience available to Santa Barbara students as well. Hearing your personal stories of your positive experiences attending your own neighborhood school as a child was the highlight of the evening for me. Several of you commented on the increase in housing and how that may call for another one of our CNS priorities, another elementary school in downtown Santa Barbara. I look forward to working with current board members, future board members, Maldonado, administrative staff in the coming months. It was our goal to provide a fair and unbiased forum. We hope that you feel that we succeeded in that endeavor, and we hope that each candidate benefited from the exposure and the experience. Thank you very much.
President Capps, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you so much. I do want to just clarify one thing that was said in public comment on Teen Talk. Certainly there was many parents and members of the community in support of Teen Talk, and it was also supported by our educators. With that, we're done with public comment. I think it might be time, since we're switching around things, to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll move to our action agenda items, and we're moving right along here. Thanks to everyone for bearing with the new process. I think it's working well so far. So we'll be right back at about, let's just say 9:05. That's 8 minutes from now. Thank you. Okay, let's see how we're doing here with our board Zoom attendance. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we are moving around the agenda a little bit. If I'm out of step, please feel free to get me back on direction. I think we're now moving to the action agenda, which is item E1 through 6. Just double checking, did we miss anything up above? No. So item E1, this is the approval of resolution number 2020/21, schools and local community funding, otherwise known as Prop 15. And I turn it over to my colleagues, Dr. Reed and Rose Munoz.
Thank you, President Capps. Dr. Reed and I brought this resolution forward in hopes of supporting revenue to benefit our students. Proposition 15 would raise significant new revenues for schools and local governments by changing the way most commercial and industrial property taxes are levied. At the same time, it gives protection for residential property and small businesses and agricultural property. So the initiative has no impact on property taxes on homes. On September 8th, at the past board meeting, when we brought this resolution forward, initially we had spoken about the amount of money that this, if this proposition is passed, how much money it would generate. And just to clarify, is that, let me see, the amount that was calculated was based on an LCFF district. However, we're a community funded district. So as Mcbride, said, we would receive $100 per average daily attendance, so that the amount generated by this proposition would differ from the, let's see, I believe like the 8 million that was initially quoted. It has the support of Tony Thurman, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the California Teachers Association, and the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. And in addition to that, the Santa Barbara County Supervisors also supports it. So I'll turn it over to Jackie, and we'll go ahead and read the resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz, and for clarifying that information. Yes, this is Schools and Local Communities Funding Act of 2020, and we're going to take turns reading the resolution through. Whereas for 4 decades, school districts in California have experienced underinvestment and devastating cuts, causing California's school funding to fall behind and resulting in fewer services and resources for students and teachers. And
whereas experts estimate that the California Schools and Local Communities Funding Act reclaims $12 billion in property tax revenue every year to ensure that our schools and communities have the resources to educate all of our kids and the services to support all of our families. And
Whereas the California Schools and Local Communities Funding Act does not affect property taxes for homeowners or renters because the initiative exempts all residential property. And
whereas academic researchers at the University of Southern California have identified that the vast majority of the reclaimed revenue will come from just a small fraction of large properties. And
whereas California schools are falling behind, ranking lowest in the nation with the lowest number of students per teacher and the fewest counselors per student. And
whereas per pupil funding has declined from the top 10 in the nation to 39. And
whereas the measure would provide SBUSD with additional funds annually if it passes statewide in November. And
whereas additional funding would enable Santa Barbara Unified School District to better prepare the next generation of students to compete in the global economy. And
whereas the California Schools and Local Communities Funding Act guarantees funding to all school districts over and above Proposition 98 funding and following the local control funding formula to all students. And
whereas the measure also provides billions in funding yearly for cities, counties, and special districts in locally controlled revenues for affordable housing, parks, libraries, emergency responders, health and human services, public infrastructure, and much more. And
whereas the California Schools Local Communities Funding Act of 2020 is expected to be on the November 2020 ballot. And
whereas now more than ever, in light of the national and state economic crisis precipitated by the COVID-19 global pandemic, Santa Barbara Unified School District will require additional revenues for the continued provision of services to the children, youth, and families.
And Rose, if you want to continue.
Okay, sorry. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Santa Barbara Unified School District endorses the California Schools and Local Communities Funding Act of 2020 for a ballot measure in November 2020. Passed and adopt. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead and
passed and passed and adopt.
We're going to stop there until we hear from our public comment and then take the vote.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Superintendent Maldonado, to both of you. Okay, so I guess because we did, just as a reminder, we did discuss this last meeting, and now as we do take this back up for action now, I believe we do have a handful of speakers from public comment. And then we'll go back to the board.
Yes, we have 8 speakers, and I'll name off the first 5. We have Daniel Gonzalez, Yesenia Ramirez Garcia, Marisol Mendoza, Melissa Villafuerte, and Wendy Benitez Jaramillo. So we'll start with Daniel Gonzalez. Daniel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you, board. My name is Daniel Gonzalez. I'm the lead organizer with Future Leaders of America. I'm calling to support Prop 15, also known as Schools and Communities First. For far too long, our communities have been severely underfunded, and COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the situation. There are many more budget cuts coming from Prop 15. Coming, and Prop 15 will help to alleviate some of these monetary issues. It's time that large corporations pay their fair share and our education and communities receive the funding they deserve. SBUSD is expected to receive $8.4 million in funds, which can be used to address the educational needs of our youth. For the past 40 years, large corporations have been using shady schemes and loopholes to avoid paying their fair share, which has really impacted our communities and local small businesses. Not only will Prop 15 generate year-round funding for our local schools and communities, but it's also going to provide a huge tax incentive for small businesses valued under $3 million. This is a tax break on $500,000 worth of fixtures and equipment that small businesses and farmers can receive and take advantage of, leading to more business growth that our community really requires right now during this time. So I urged the school board to endorse Prop 15, Schools and Communities First. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Yesenia Ramirez Garcia. Yesenia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, I'm Yesenia. I'm a graduate of this year from Dos Pueblos High School, and I'm here in support of Proposition 15 because I know that this district could really use the money, especially in meeting the demands of ethnic studies and their needs, which they brought up earlier because our ethnic studies, they need a department for our teachers to organize and collaborate. Not only that, but ethnic studies needs the necessary resources such as textbooks in order to teach this subject. Not only that, but like the money generated from Prop 15 from the property taxes that our communities would receive would also help, our local businesses so we can, continue having State Street be as it is, especially during COVID-19 where we've seen that small businesses have really seen a hit. And I know like SB wouldn't really be its same without like State Street and all the many like restaurants that it has just like along the street. And I know that this could also help, our peak program to kind of keep it running and have that be like a necessary resource for many students, because I know peak helped me during high school and I saw how it helped other students as well, not only avid students but other students outside of avids, because sometimes there'd be teachers of the school tutoring and they'd invite their own students to come get help. So that's kind of why I support Prop 15, because I can see it doing a lot of good, and that's only for our
30
district.
seconds.
And kind of imagine like if all the districts had the funding, kind of imagine how much elevated our education would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Marisol Mendoza. Marisol, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, good evening, members of the school board. My name is Marisol Mendoza, a community member. I am here in support of Proposition 15, Schools and Communities First. Prop 15 will bring an additional $8.4 million to the Santa Barbara Unified School District. That means investing in our students now. Our students deserve well-qualified teachers and counselors that can guide them towards the college path. When I attended high school, we were limited on resources that I think would have been needed for my success. Luckily for me, I was able to find my way through high school and the path to college. Unfortunately, that is not the case for every student in high school. More counselors are needed for assistance. For example, high school counselors have a lot of students to focus on, and it doesn't help that students develop a relationship / trust between the student and counselor when they are not available. Students need readily available counselors in order to ask for help and guidance on their educational journey. Schools and Communities First would help fund more counselors for our schools who are lacking in this very essential service. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Melissa Villafuerte. Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Alrighty. Good evening, school board members. My name is Melissa Villafuerte, and I'm a community member here in Santa Barbara. I'm here today to speak in favor of Proposition 15. As we all know, COVID has exacerbated the education inequities in our communities, and I think we should all contribute to fixing this. I strongly believe that Proposition 15 should be endorsed by our district because it will ensure that the equity gap is closed in our local schools. More importantly, it will make sure that our youth get the best education and support in attaining their highest potential, personally and academically. With the $6.5 million that we will receive through Schools and Communities First, our schools will finally be able to have adequate textbooks, necessary devices to make education accessible to all, and full-time counselors and nurses. I urge you to endorse Proposition 15 to make sure that the reclaimed funds can contribute to aiding our community and our future generations of leaders. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Wendy Benitez Jaramillo. Wendy, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hello, my name is Wendy Benitez and I'm 16 years old and I'm a junior at San Marcos High School. The experience I have working on Schools and Communities First is volunteering to phone bank during the summer. During phone banking, we outreached to voters and made them aware of what Prop 15 is. I know that Prop 15 will be on the ballot, and if voted yes, it will raise revenue that will be invested in schools and communities. If Prop 15 is passed, then it will bring an additional $8.4 million to the district. This is important to me because I have recognized the inequities there are among the youth, and COVID only exacerbated these inequities. Not all students have the opportunity to have a device to do their work on, nor do they have the best connection. Learning from home has been difficult, especially for low-income Latino communities, since multiple families may live in a single household, making it difficult to achieve all schoolwork. Furthermore, most parents have to work. Why? So that they could keep their cash flow coming in order to sustain their family. This means that students with younger siblings take care of them and help them with their schoolwork, which is not a simple task. I know this from personal experience. When we transitioned into remote learning, I had to watch over my younger sister and cousins, all who are still in elementary. It was not easy at all. It was hard to focus on my own classes while making sure they joined their classes on time. To make matters worse, I had to share my school iPad with my sister so she could do her homework and attend her classes as well. Sometimes she would use my phone because our class times would interfere. There have also been a few times where we have to go outside of our house to use my phone's data and connect to the hotspot because all of a sudden our Wi-Fi goes off. So you have us all outside trying to do our work. Overall, the reason as to why this is important to me is because I know there are students in worse conditions than mine, and I want our community to provide help for the students who really need it. If Prop 15 doesn't pass, California will get major budget cuts and students will not get the best support they can receive. So please endorse schools and communities first so that us students can have the resources we need. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Katie Nunez, Fatima Lopez Orozco, and Olivia Carranza. We will start with Katie Nunez. Katie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katie Nunez and I attend San Marcos High School as a sophomore, and I'm here as a supporter of Schools and Communities First. Throughout this year, I participated in phone banking and attended the Schools and Communities First training. What I gained from that training was that our community will be getting $12 billion. By supporting Prop 15, our school district will be getting a portion of the money which can help improve a student's education. I remember in my physics class that I took last year, our teacher had to ask my classmates if our parents would be able to donate money because they didn't have enough money to buy the materials we needed. Because of this, we weren't able to do certain lessons. If for some reason Prop 15 doesn't get passed through, it will affect small businesses, school funding, etc. Especially now the impact will be greater due to COVID-19. Prop 15 will benefit all of those who will be affected without it. I encourage all of you to endorse Schools and Communities First. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Fatima Lopez.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I ask that you endorse Prop 15, also known as Schools and Communities First. Prop 15 will increase the fundings for public schools in our community by making large commercial and industrial properties pay their fair share in taxes. This is important to me because I see the lack of resources our schools needs, and this is most evident in the amount of counselors we have per student at our schools. As a student, I feel that my voice isn't being heard by my counselor. I've had an encounter where I needed my schedule changed because they had added me to a class that I had already passed with an A, and I felt that I shouldn't have been re-enrolled. They took 3 days to respond, and when they finally got a meeting with my counselor, I was told to be patient because she was so busy. Of course, I understand that they are occupied with other students, but I feel that they need extra assistance to get the job done. But these situations cause a lot of my peers and I to miss opportunities when we have to switch classes so late in the registration period. I also want to stress that COVID has exacerbated inequalities and much needed services are under attack. Prop 15 can be used to close the equity gap in our schools, and I ask that you please endorse Prop 15. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Olivia Carranza. Olivia, ¿nos puede escuchar?
Sí, voy a hablar en inglés, por favor.
Oh, okay. Muy bien. Go ahead.
Gracias. Good evening, board members and community. My name is Olivia Carranza, and I have 3 children. They attend Dos Pueblos High School, Santa Barbara City College, and San Francisco State University. I'm in favor of Proposition 15. This new funding will offer many opportunities for our schools, community colleges, and city. Our students, teachers, counselors, social workers, registered nurses, psychologists, and staff deserve to be properly trained, educated, informed, but most importantly, to get qualified for their individual jobs. Proposition 15 will make sure multi-million-dollar companies pay their fair share of commercial taxes. I ask all the school board and community to support Proposition 15. To end, I would like you to pay attention to the ways you are informing the Latino parents about the challenges we are facing today with our schools. As a Latino parent, I'm telling you that most Latino parents aren't getting this information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. President Capps, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you so much to our speakers for weighing in this evening. And now it's time for the board. I know we discussed it last meeting, but if there's any additional questions or comments you want to make before we take a vote on this resolution. Ms. Sims-Motin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the public comments. I appreciate the comments from the students and glad to see them involved in this and how our schools are being funded and how it impacts them directly. And I also want to thank, again, Ms. Munoz and Dr. Reed for bringing this very important resolution before the board for adoption. I just had a couple things that's going on. Can we, again, Mr. Tay, state clearly what it is that Santa Barbara Unified will be receiving? I know there's a couple statements that's come out here through the comments, and I just want to be really clear about what it is that we would be receiving.
Surely. So I believe what has happened is that the information out there is based on if we were an LCFF district. We are not an LCFF district. We are a community funded or basic aid district. So with that being said, we will receive $100 per ADA, which is average daily attendance. And when this is fully implemented, we will be very heavily into basic aid. So there will be no question as whether our status is LCFF or basic aid.
So do you have an approximate amount? Because I've just seen the amounts as being saying out there, and it's 8 million, 6 million. Can you give us an approximate amount that's more closely to what we're
1.3 right now. If I did the calculation today, it'd be about 1.3 million.
Okay, I think that's just really important for people to understand what we will actually be receiving. And then secondly, would there be any restriction as to how we can spend the funding? Is it unrestricted?
It's very unrestricted because it's above the Prop 98 money. So it comes in from the state to us.
Okay. And the last thing I would just say, I would say this to either Ms. Munoz or Dr. Reed to address. As you may be aware, there's lots of commercials out there that's really exacerbating fear over the fact with regards to how this will harm small businesses. As you notice, some of the commercials are saying the small business will be going out of business as a result of Prop 15. So is there a limit? I've heard it from 3 million up or 3 million down, you won't be impacted by that. And so can we talk about that as well? Just because of the fear people may not, given COVID now and businesses are not able to survive. So will this make it worse? I know that's what the commercial is saying, but I don't think that's factual.
Well, I can just speak. It's above 3 million.
Okay, for businesses above 3 million.
Right.
Okay, that's good because I know a lot of people are thinking that small businesses are going to be run out of business as a result of this very important proposition to get schools, to get dollars back into our community and in our schools. So I fully support that. Again, thank you for bringing it forth, and that's my comments on that.
Yes, and I was just going to mention, I'm trying to find the exact numbers right now, but it would actually have a benefit for small businesses so that their expenses, they would actually have a benefit to it. So it's more of a support than a hindrance.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Well, I'll just weigh in. I'm all for this proposition. I plan on voting for it personally. I'm endorsing it and support this resolution. I really appreciate my colleagues for bringing it forward, and to the students and to those who've spoken out in favor of it. I just know, big interests, special interests have a lot of power when it comes to the ways in which our laws are written. And the first and foremost ways that special interests get their way is to kind of mess with the tax code and make sure that there's loopholes. So whenever I see that there's a potential for closing a loophole like this one, I think it's a good idea. And the fact that this benefits our schools makes me all the more enthusiastic. So how about this? I think I'm okay to move forward with supporting a motion unless one of the two authors would prefer to do that. I'll give the floor.
I'm happy to have you do
Yeah,
it.
why don't you do it, Dr. Reed, as the, why don't you move, and with the second by Ms. Munoz, would that work?
Sure.
Here I am teeing it up for you. Okay.
All right.
With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes again, thanks to all. So now we are moving forward on our agenda. Of course, I have to move my screen here. So we are at item E2. Mr. Vizzolini, you've been quite patient, although it's not too late in the night. Approval to enter into contract negotiations with NG Services on a power purchase agreement in support of Santa Barbara Unified Solar Plus.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Maldonado, and members of the public. It's been quite a few months since we've talked about this, so I'm happy to report that we have an update on the district-wide solar project, and we're ready to have the board take action this evening. Next slide, please. So a reminder of our original goals on this project was to have no upfront costs and a 0% escalation for the entire power purchase, or PPA. Unfortunately, try as we might, we were not able to accomplish that. So tonight we're asking the board to consider a couple of options. I'll go through those real quick, and then at the end we'll revisit these and have you discuss them and give us some direction on how you'd like us to move forward. So option one is a $800,000 upfront cost that's financed over the first 7 years of the PPA. It's about $220,000 a year in year one, and it drops down to $10,000 the last year. That is 0% escalation, which means we have a flat line cost for our electricity purchase for the entire duration of the PPA. Also, the second option is we could pursue 0 upfront costs, but we would have to go back to negotiate with our PPA provider for an increase in the escalator over the entire same period. And just for reference for the board, in talking with our consultants, we think a 2% escalation is probably close to what we'd need to get 0 upfront costs. And that weighs out to about $4.5 million, which is half of our savings for the entire project. So it's something to weigh the differences for you. I would also point out that the upfront cost, the driver for that, is essentially the microgrid process, which gives us our resiliency. And I'll explain where that happens and what the value is of that, but that is the cost of having that resiliency. Next screen, please. So a reminder of our project background. We started out with trying to get solar at all of our school sites. We landed on 14. There's a couple of reasons for that. A few of our schools, Harding, McKinley, and Peabody's parking lots are too small to generate enough power to pay for themselves, so they would have ended up costing us. And Washington School was very challenging. Given the views, we decided to try and put a ground-mounted system, but found that it was going to be in the coastal zone, and we had trees outside of our property line that we couldn't control, and the city of Santa Barbara didn't sound real interested in having them taken down. So the production there was going to be also very low. So we eliminated those from a cost standpoint. Out of those 14 sites, we have 6 that we've identified for microgrids. I'll explain those in just a moment. So the benefits, why do we need to do this now? The main reason right now is that the government incentives and tax credits that our PPA provider will be taking advantage of are, they're helpful for our financial plan. The tax credits are going away each year, they're decreasing. And so waiting to do this later would just result in further costs for us to finance the PPA. Another reason that we're going forward now is we're trying to meet the board's commitment to solarizing our schools and improving our sustainability and reducing our climate impact. We also think that this is a good opportunity to provide strategically placed community resources for extended power outages, and we would be able to do that without the use of generators, which is the opposite of sustainable. Next slide, please. So where do we get our power? So our solar electricity would come from our electrical panels, and the solar panels will save us, provide bill savings for when we produce more power than we use. That's a process called net metering. So times like the summer, weekends, holidays, spring break, Christmas break, when our schools aren't being utilized to their full extent and we're producing power with our solar panels, we actually will do some net metering and get some credit back on our bills. So we have 14 sites that we're offsetting 90% of our electricity, and that equates to quite a bit of carbon neutral power because we're not generating at an electric plant. We're also avoiding greenhouse gas emissions, and then the obvious extra benefit of providing shade for areas on our campuses. Next slide, please. So batteries, these are kind of like the important factor of our whole microgrid process. The batteries are where we store our energy and we're allowed to use it at another time. So they give us critical areas that will remain powered during outages. They allow us to engage in what we call energy arbitrage, which we've talked about before, which is basically using our batteries to leverage when we purchase power. So we can use our batteries when power is expensive, and we can charge our batteries when power is inexpensive or when our solar panels can take over for that and take care of that. So the other perk of the batteries is they're the part that give us that long-term resilience for our 6 sites with microgrids. Next sites, please. Next slide, excuse me. So we've been talking about microgrids. So what are microgrids? Microgrids have 3 main components. They have the solar panels, they have the batteries, and they have microgrid controllers. And what they allow us is to have power even during an outage. So the way it works is at our school sites, all of the electrical loads for these 6 schools, or sites, excuse me, are identified and prioritized. And then we assign them a tier 1 through 3 priority, tier 1 being the highest. The tier 1s are critical systems like data systems and cold storage, kitchens, things like that. So the microgrids give us that flexibility. They determine what stays on when we lose power. And critical loads at these sites would stay on 100% of the time. And quite a few more of the second tier loads would stay on for 80% of the time. They allow us to use our sites as community resource centers. So, you know, one of the things we talk about is sheltering during a public safety power shutdown or a rolling blackout, which we've had both happen to us in the past year. So this would give us some resilience at those sites. We could also, in an extended power outage, provide meal service because we would have kitchens that would be powered and cold storage. We could provide access to the internet for families that were affected by having no power, therefore no data in their homes. It could also be used for distance learning, or excuse me, online learning for those kids. They could literally drive to a parking lot and have internet access at one of our schools or even a playground possibly. So there's some functionality there. And I think the last thing that we wanted to consider is that we're providing a service to our first responders. At Dos Pueblos High School and at San Marcos specifically, we have had incident command centers, and we've had our daily updates for the press. And so this would give an opportunity for both of those sites to stay powered up, which would be a big resource for those groups. Next slide, or the next slide, please. So these are the sites that we are considering for microgrids. You'll notice that we have our 3 comprehensive high schools. The locations were chosen geographically so that we cover the east side with Santa Barbara High School. We cover both sides of the Goleta Valley. We also chose La Cumbre Junior High School because of its location on the west side. And we felt that having that community resource on the west side would be great for that community. The other 2 are the district office. We chose that because of its ability to keep district-wide communication and data systems operational. So if we have a power outage downtown, all of the schools that aren't affected would still have all of the data services that we use now, like Aries and some of those others. And then the last is the facilities and maintenance warehouse area, which obviously has their cold storage. So we've got 4 large walk-in freezers, a walk-in cooler, and we think that this is an important place to keep powered up. One other potential that we've talked about a little bit is the fact that there are other there's other firms, including one of our partners in this, the Clean Coalition, which is determined to try and set up regional microgrids. So we've talked about the Goleta load pocket in the past, and basically what that is the Edison feed to our entire area. It comes through one place, and if for any reason that goes down, our whole area is without power. And so the idea of creating this regional microgrid that could be used with places like UCSB, who is working on it, the city of Carpinteria, I believe, is working on, as well as possibly Santa Barbara County. So there are other entities that we could work together with to try and support our communities. Next slide, please. So part of our remaining project overview, except for actual construction, is really the contracts. So we have a power purchase agreement, which is the agreement between the district and the provider, which handles all of the financing, the design, the construction, all of the approval process with the Division of State Architect, and maintenance and operation of all these systems for the entire duration of the PPA. So that's one contract. The battery storage guarantee basically does what it says. It guarantees that the batteries that are designed are going to do what they're supposed to do, and they're going to give us our resiliency factor for the life of our project, that 28 years. The resiliency services agreement is kind of like a maintenance contract. And so what that does is there's a group that comes in and quarterly checks our 6 sites with microgrids and actually tests them, turns power off, makes sure the batteries are charged properly, make sure the level of their charge is appropriate for the site they're at, and that tier 1, tier 2 loads are operating properly through the microgrid controllers. We also have site leases to consider for the places where the actual solar arrays will be located on the school sites. And a reminder, this is a 28-year term. Originally, we were looking at 25 years, but we were able to actually lower some of those upfront costs by extending it by 3 years. So that's the reason we're looking at 28. And then the last part is that the third party owns this stuff. We don't have any costs to maintain any of this for the entire 28 years. It's their responsibility. At the end, we've negotiated a buyback, which is very reasonable. And so we have options. We can say, get it out of here if it hasn't been working, or we can purchase it for a very reasonable price below market level. Next slide, please. So these 2 graphs show you, the first on the left, the green bars show that the kind of upfront cost outlay that we talked about at the beginning. And you see the $220,000 at the beginning, and you see as it decreases until we get to year 7. And so in year 8 is when we start seeing savings. The right-hand side, you see the same green bar shows what our lifetime bill savings is anticipated to be, and you can see that's very nearly $8 million. The brown bars are a little interesting. They are something the solar community refers to as value of resiliency. And so the number you look at in the right-hand column is not revenue for the district. I like to call it more of a cost offset. So what they're considering here is, if we didn't have solar, what would we have to spend on generators to maintain these 6 properties for 28 years? So that's, if you think about the cost of the design work, permitting, the maintenance, the repair, for 28 years, they have a formula for that, and they're putting it close to $7 million. So it's significant. Additional savings that we see as possibilities are electrical rate increases. As you know, with the infrastructure going down, Edison's already talking about raising rates. Our consultants gave us a very conservative 3% a year. We think it's going to go more than that. So if we have our flat escalator, anything that goes up is actually going to end up being a savings for us, right? Because we're saving over what the bill would have been. The other thing we have to consider is that by having batteries on site, Edison is considering developing incentives for people who self-generate. So if we have our power in batteries, then they would provide us with better rates for providing relief to the Edison grid during certain times. Next slide, please. So timeline. You can see what we've done so far. We've got our feasibility studies done, the conceptual designs done. We ran our request for proposals and did interviews with the top 3. We then offered the top 3 the opportunity to give us a best and final offer. So we really tightened up in a competition mode to get them to give us the best we can get. In August, we reviewed those as our team with SAGE and Clean Coalition and the district team. And we were in agreement that NG's proposal was the best value out of the 3 remaining. So our next steps are what we're doing tonight, which is discussing the contracts and having the board take action on that, which is part of the Government Code 4217. And if approved, we would come back to the board in November with approved negotiated contracts with NG. And a resolution that also satisfies GC 4217, which says, as a public entity, we are not allowed to be in a power purchase agreement unless it saves money over the duration of the project. It would be against the law for us to do it otherwise. So we need that resolution, which we'll bring to you. Following that, we're going into implementation of the project. So some due diligence and some planning by the group that's going to actually do those installations. They're going to go to get plans and specs done. They're going to do the site development. They're going to go to DSA and get all the approvals. They're going to hire the subcontractors. We're going to have one project manager that kind of works with them to keep our interest in mind, but they will be handling the heavy lift there. So we're anticipating construction starting in June and going through about October of 2021. And with project commissioning and closeout happening right around the beginning of the school year, or excuse me, the new year. Next slide, please. So now it's time for some decisions by the board. Obviously, we want to know yes or no if you would like us to proceed. And if so, we'd like to know which option you'd like to use, the upfront version with it funded over 7 years with no escalation, or whether you're more interested in the no upfront cost, where we would have to go back and negotiate that escalation factor, which would be applied to our whole contract. And if you're in agreement to move on and after you've chosen which option, then we'd also like you to approve contract negotiations with NG as our PPA provider. And with that, that's my last slide. And I would like to open this up to questions and conversation with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Vizzolini. Just to double check, I don't believe we have any public speakers on this agenda item. I don't think so. Just looking around. Okay, great. Okay, questions from the board, questions or comments? I can, oh, Ms. Ford. Ms. Ford, did you have a question?
Searching all over for the mute button. No, mostly just a comment, I think, although I'd like a little bit more clarification about this concept of 2 motions tonight. But just wanted to say that I really love the cost savings, because it's actually one of the times that we're truly planning for district fiscal health in the future. And of course, reducing our carbon footprint and is wonderful. And it seems essential now, especially with global warming, that we create a system where we can be independent and have electricity ourselves. Seems extremely smart. I also think it's great that Montecito Union School District is also implementing a solar project with a power purchase agreement. So to me, it's like Santa Barbara schools are getting this done.
Excellent. Other questions or comments? Superintendent Maldonado, did you raise your hand?
I did. Actually, just want to clarify with Mr. Vizzolini. We sort of talked a little bit about this. Just to clarify, these are not going, and of course this was before my time, so I apologize, I'm jumping in here. These are not going on the roofs of school sites. They're actually going to be over parking lots only. Is that correct?
They're not going on buildings. However, they're mostly on parking lots. There are a couple, I think 2 sites, Adams and Monroe, I believe, where they've got very, very large playgrounds where we can tuck them off up to the side. And it made much better sense from a positioning standpoint for how the sun travels across the site, and it made them more efficient. But you're right, almost all of them are in parking lots.
Thank you. I've just seen a case where the roofs and putting them on roofs becomes another added risk. So
We talked about that very early with our consultants. And not only do you have the ongoing maintenance issues and nightmares with taking solar panels off to repair a roof, the DSA approval process is a nightmare, and it would have extended this project 5 years.
Thank you.
Right, and just, oh, Dr. Reed.
Well, I just wanted to say, Mr. Vizzolini, for topics that are actually very challenging to understand in my techie or non-techie brain, I really appreciated the layout and the transparency of the process and all of how everything fits together and the benefits that we gain from all of this. And certainly the cost savings, and certainly it just meets the needs of our whole emphasis around environmental sustainability, which I'm sure Ms. Capps is just going to just express a lot more than I'm saying right now, because this is her bailiwick. But I very, very much support it and feel very strongly for, you know, supporting what you've shared. And it looks like such an innovative opportunity for us. And I just appreciated the thoughtfulness and the information for me to think about. I think I'm not sure what is the best approach to do. I'd like us to sort of talk about that a little bit more as a board in terms of the upfront 7 years. So what would be the benefit, Mr. Vizzolini, to doing that approach, to just do it up front and just move forward in that direction?
Well, I think the biggest is the escalation. If we go with a zero up front, estimated at 2%, that's $4.5 million. That's more than half of our total $8 million savings for the 28 years. So $800,000 versus $4.5 million to me seems like a fairly easy decision. And it's also important to note that the higher fees at the beginning, they decrease pretty quickly. So it's really about 4 years, and then we're getting down below $100,000, which is not, you know, it's not a pittance, but it's not a huge number. And it can only get better. You know, I mean, as rates go up, we're going to pay it off faster. So as we see Edison's rate go up, we might see that number actually shorten a bit.
So you brought forward these choices, but in essence, your positionality is upfront. Let's move forward with the upfront 7 years.
I think it makes the most sense financially.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Dr. Reed. Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I had a question, you know, in terms of course, the neighborhoods that would be served. I mean, the map in terms of Dos Pueblos, and then the east side and the west side and so forth. Can you explain a little bit? I was trying to understand, would it be that students can take advantage of the Wi-Fi if in an emergency? Could you expand on that a little bit? Not sure I understood.
Yes, for two reasons. Because the district office will be one of the microgrid sites that always stays up. The data center in the basement of the district office is the key. So we're keeping that operational with batteries on site for that. And then at La Cumbra, our batteries are going to provide critical power for the kitchen and for their data center, which powers their type of thing. So we'll pick a location that enables our Wi-Fi that we've already put in those parking lots to support distance learning, and for folks that need to come actually get some internet access on our site. We're going to make sure we keep that running.
Yeah, thank you very much. That helps. And also, you know, we've had so many, of course, natural disasters in the area, and you know, the accessibility for the emergency responders is a huge plus. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Munoz. Ms. Sims-Boughton.
Thank you, Mr. Vizzolini. I agree with the comments of how you make it so much comprehensive to kind of understand some of these complex details. Of course, you know, the devil is in the details. And so I have a couple of detailed questions with regards to, because it feels like, although I hear what you're saying in terms of the most economically efficient, that the upfront costs, we pay that off the 7 years, but it feels like we're paying it but we're not going to get it back for 7 years. And I'm concerned about our ongoing fiscal problems and the COVID that we're having to deal with. So one question would be not necessarily for you, but maybe it's for Meg. Where are we going to get this initial? Is it initial $200,000? How much are we putting up front? And I know you said that it's decreasing over time, but what are we putting out front given where we are financially? Because we're not getting this back for at least 7 years, or at least the benefit.
Want me to answer that, Meg? Okay, I'll try. So yes, it's $220,000 the first year, and it decreases each year after that. And like I said, by the time we get to year 4, it's about, I think it's about $80,000. So it doesn't stay 200 all the way across the first 7 years. The other thing that we have to remember is that right now, during the first 7 years, we're still going to have that value of resiliency, which means that those 6 sites, if we get a PSPS, we're going to be able to service quite a few people in our district, whether we paid the money or not. It's done. It's because we're doing the solar anyway. We almost get that resiliency for free because we're paying for the project, right? So once we get to that, the flexibility of being able to move kids if we needed to, and have some learning going on and keep our district office awake and all of our district staff working, I think that's really important.
And I'd just like to add one thing to that, in the beginning, when I first saw that we were going to have money up front, it is kind of hard to swallow, but to lock in 0 escalation for 28 years, I was just overwhelmed by that. That is the benefit of doing the no escalation and a small amount of money up front. And
okay.
Carbon footprint, we start on that a lot earlier by getting it done quicker instead of going back and redoing the PPA.
Okay, because I can appreciate that. So could you tell me, so the 220, so I'm assuming that's going to come back somewhere in our budget, and we're going to see where that's coming from, what line item, whether it's, I'm assuming on the unrestricted side. So just trying to figure out where we are, because it certainly wasn't in our budget that has been presented, because we weren't at this point yet, I'm assuming, right?
That's correct. And also we are looking into other funding methods, other buckets of money. We have developer fees. We have some other buckets that we could tap into. So it may not come from the general fund. And that would be all of our preference, right?
Yes, because anything that, that would reduce any to, supporting our students through this, certainly I would be hesitant to support that, because we, understand the criticalness of making sure that, what we're doing is do no harm to our students and their learning, and in the midst of this environment, not only for this moment, but, that we're going to still look at some of the, the cost of just getting through COVID, as we just explained the earlier part of this year. So there's going to be ongoing costs, and just want to make sure that this is not, although it's beneficial, and I know it's reducing the carbon footprint, it's very important, but I just want to make sure we're doing no harm to our overall student in the long term of doing that. And yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say, if you'd like, Ms. Sims-Moten, what we could do is when we come back with approval of the actual contracts with NG, we can identify to you where we decided to pull that money from, so you're aware of where it comes from.
Yes, that would be great. So, and then just one other question with regards to the tax credits. You mentioned that the tax credits are decreasing over each year, and so it's important for us to, in a timely manner, to get this signed and get it going. So, okay.
Yeah. So the tax credits are not taken by us; they are taken by the PPA provider. That's what makes it. That's the advantage they get to financing the project, right? So they get to take the tax credits and the incentives. So as those incentives go down, they can't offer as good a rate.
Okay, so it's their benefit, therefore we're benefit on the indirectly, because they're getting to do, therefore the cost is going down as a result of that.
Exactly. I believe it goes down 2% in January. So getting this done before the end of the year is a good thing. We'll be under contract.
Okay. And then just one last question on the resiliency, because that was one of my questions too. Are we going to have, how do we review that this is still the right thing to do? And are we locked in to, if let's say somewhere midways, it's not doing what we wanted to do, what happens? Are we obligated once we sign it, or is there some leeway in how we can be able to work through it? Flexibility.
the systems are guaranteed to perform. It's part of the PPA. So it'll be a contractual item. So if they say that they're going to be able to produce, X kilowatt hours per school, they have to produce it.
Okay.
It's on them. And there's contract language with penalties and things like that and opt-outs. So there is a way for us to get out of it if they're not performing correctly.
Yeah, because it's a long time, and I just figured I wouldn't want us locked in with no flexibility to say, no, this is not working for us, in terms of those pieces, right? So.
Yes, we do have an out.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation and answering those questions.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump on here just as in terms of the money, because just as a reminder to the board, we did fund a position in sustainability at about $100,000 a year that has yet to be filled. So there is some money that's been directed by this board for sustainability. This is obviously a massive transformation, and I couldn't be more excited about what this will actually look like and the fact that it's moving along so well. So my applause to you, Mr. Vizzolini. I can hear it in your voice, the excitement. This is a lot to take on, but it's so important. We just see these wildfires burning, 600 wildfires in California, and knowing what those communities had to go through and how they were shut down. Mostly it was rural, but certainly communities were impacted. And the fact is this will be such, creating our schools as turning them into safe havens in a time when we have such extreme climate weather events, and we know that this is the reality that our students are inheriting. So I'm excited. I'm supportive of the cost now in order to achieve all of that savings later, and hope that there might be consensus among the board for a motion at this point so that we can move forward. Ms. Ford.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, there you go.
Make a motion that we approve to enter into contract negotiations with NG Services to develop a power purchase agreement and pay upfront costs of $800,000 over 7 years with zero escalation.
And I will second.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I just add one thing? So, and I'm in favor of it. I won't have this pause think I'm not, but I just want to make sure that we come back budget-wise, ensuring where it's coming from. I know it's really important to have that line item. So I want this part of that as we're approving that's important to bring it back to us in the budget. So with that, I'm with the aye. Okay.
With that, I just want to double check. I saw because I didn't see Ms. Munoz, but I think you raised your hand. Okay, good. All in favor? Aye. We have motion carries, and this is a massive transformation. I know there's so much that this board is dealing with right now, but the fact is we are making a huge investment in the future of this district, the future of our students, and the future of our planet. I can't get more dramatic than that, but it's true. So I really appreciate all around and the board support. Okay, with that, we're moving right along here, trying to keep this going at a fast pace. We do have a couple more action agenda items that should move pretty quickly. Item E3, Ms. Carey and Escobedo. This is approval of this is Learning Continuity Attendance Plan. We did talk about it last meeting. We do have a couple of public speakers, but I believe. So let's bring it back up again. And this is again, just time for the board to ask any additional questions and take action.
Thank you, President Capps. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Maldonado, and others who are joining us. I'm happy to bring before you for your approval the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, or for short, the Learning Continuity Plan. As a reminder, the California Department of Education, in light of COVID and the significant disruption that has ensued from COVID, for school year 2021 has suspended a normal LCAP and has instead said what we need you to focus on is the development of a plan known as the Learning Continuity Plan that manages and describes all of the actions and related expenditures that are responsive to the uncertainty we're contending with COVID. So it's even though we're bringing this forward, Ms. Escobedo and I, this definitely represents a collaborative effort on the part of our executive cabinet and is informed by various stakeholder groups, and also a community survey for which there were over 3,000 responses. I do want to point out, since we brought this before you 2 weeks ago in draft form, that we did make some revisions based on stakeholder feedback since that time. So this final version, specifically, I want to highlight those revisions. It includes the integration of our small cohort reentry plan, which we've talked about tonight. We were not in a place in the first week of September to be including that plan in this plan. So we have that here, and we speak to it under supports for students with unique needs, as well as under the section on mental health and social emotional well-being. A second revision is the incorporation of our plans for ensuring effective distance learning by further developing the instructional strategies used to engage students and differentiate learning. And so we've highlighted that in our professional learning section. And then finally, we have updated our parent training resources in the pupil and family engagement and outreach section. So since we brought this plan to you previously, we've developed videos in English and Spanish that can be accessed through our website and that support families in using the technology that, of course, we're needing to rely on to have students access their learning. So those are some concrete revisions that we made since 2 Tuesdays ago. I wanted to make sure to bring those, to elevate those to your attention. And we'll certainly take any questions, myself and any other members of executive cabinet who might be the best to respond. And we'll request your action on this. The state does require by law that the board approve this prior to September 30th. So here we are.
Sorry, that was my turn to look for the mute button. Thank you, Ms. Carey. I believe now we'll go to 2 public comment speakers, if they are still hanging there with us.
Yes, we have Sunita. And we also have James Claffey. So we'll start with Sunita, but I don't see her on. So we'll go for James Claffey. James, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes.
Go ahead, James.
I speak for many teachers who have voiced their concerns about the apparent lack of district consideration for teacher well-being in the LCP plan for school reopening. Many of our most vulnerable students are attending class with multiple siblings under their care, zooming in from living situations that range from stressful to untenable and worse. Teachers are on the front lines providing social and emotional support to these students and families to let them know that we have their backs. The question that concerns my colleagues and myself is, who has our backs? Who is checking in on our well-being? Who is providing the social emotional support for teachers and staff around the district? We are all experiencing collective trauma around this pandemic. I mean, a general perception from many staff is that the district does not have our backs, despite what the community emails suggest. A teacher knocked at my door today to tell me that her SPED co-teacher is stressed to breaking point, overwhelmed and overburdened. I provided the social emotional support to that teacher in the moment and then brought the matter to our site leadership team. I mean, what about the teachers and the staff that we don't hear from? The ones awake late at night planning lessons, sending emails, delivering books to homes, making phone calls to students and families, balancing parenting their own children. When teachers are weeping at home on their floors, when they're on the verge of breakdown, these are not isolated cases. They're too tired or frightened to tell you. This is becoming the norm. To paraphrase Dr. Brad Johnson, organizations that are unsuccessful are so because they don't make relationships and staff morale a priority. Please support, encourage, and appreciate your staff. Every teacher deserves to feel valued and supported by the district administration every day. The abiding question is, do you really have our backs? And thank you for your time.
I don't see the other public speaker on, so that concludes public comment on this item. President Capps.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Questions and comments from the board? I don't see any. Dr. Reed.
Yeah, sorry. I know it's a late hour, but I did want to just ask a question because it was brought to my attention in relationship to really looking at this from another from equity lens. And I believe it is being looked at from the district through a lens of equity. But I did have a question in your section on program service action. With regards to hiring of highly qualified teachers of color for ethnic studies in high school, consultation with experts on mental health and wellness for Asian American and multiracial students, the meta plan implementation, consultants to support coordination of district-wide organizational transformation efforts around anti-racism and racial climate, and finally, consultants to support student organizations for students of color. These are all to be determined. So I'm just curious as to when that is to be determined and what is the processes that will be put in place to ensure it's done in an equitable with an equitable lens. Thank you.
I'll respond generally, and then because you've listed items and I can see which ones you're referring to in the plan, they are coming forward from multiple departments, so others could chime in as well. What I will say generally is that in responding somewhat differently from other plans, and particularly even the LCAP, where we sometimes are a bit driven by the allocation of funds and accounting for all, in our case, $11 million of LCAP funding. This plan, the way the prompts were designed by the state was in the spirit of really responding to the questions. And so as we highlighted on September 8th, it wasn't about accounting for every dollar of the CARES Act, which we do in this plan, but some of these actions are funded from Gen Fund or even titles, restricted federal funds. It was really about what actions are you going to take that might be unique, new, in order to respond to the very extenuating needs of this time. And so I think we mentioned how the template itself was released in August. And of course, it was a very quick turnaround while we were launching Decision Sterling to do that. So there were several places where we wanted to make sure that we called out that, yes, we are not only committed to several of these items where we're not yet putting a dollar amount, but we've actually already taken some actions toward what you might see called out there. But we don't yet have a specific dollar amount that we can accurately say is going to capture all of the actions related to that step. So for example, I know for at least 3 of the things that you just mentioned as an example, I've participated in sort of in committee meetings, in conversations with community members about action steps. So we're already underway on lots of those actions, but don't have a dollar amount. And yet we anticipate that we likely will, as we mature, as our plans mature, we will have that dollar amount. So the TBD is not about the taking of action. The TBD is about, we don't have a precise dollar amount yet because we're still in progress in determining what that dollar amount would be. So the final thing I'll highlight, unless anybody else wants to enhance my response, would be that not every action in the learning continuity plan has an associated fiscal cost, which is also very similar to the LCAP and to our school plans for student achievement. But where there is a cost, we wanted to make sure that we could call that out and that people could see that cost more easily than combing through all 37 pages and doing that exercise themselves. So that can be a little, that budget overview is meant to help point out and make that accessible to folks, what it is we're spending money on, both CARES Act funding, but also other funds. But it's not an exhaustive representation of all the actions we're taking, if that's a helpful explanation.
I think it is very helpful. I think the key is transparency and communication. And by just asking that question, it's just what you're saying is that at this point in time, we don't necessarily have the answer to that. It doesn't mean that we're pushing this aside. It doesn't mean that this isn't important. It means that we haven't figured that out yet. And this is a new formula and it's a new plan and it's new processes that you're going through. But I guess I would just say that I feel it's really important that we continue to stick with that lens of equity when we're looking at this, and to ensure that should there need to be a dollar amount applied to those particular line items that I stated, that we would be informed what that would be and the transparency of the process of what we would be doing to address those issues around that I listed, that we would understand that. So going forward, that you will keep us informed in terms of those issues to ensure that we're being inclusive in the work that we're doing within the framework of inclusivity. Thank you.
Ms. Sims-Moton.
Yeah, can I just add on to that? And I think perhaps we got the same email, because that was going to be the questions that I was going to ask too. But I would just add, in terms of in this time and where people's minds are, certainly with the Santa Barbara Black youth, bringing those demands with regards to making our hiring practices, making sure we have a much more diverse, teaching, proper classified, certificate, representative of the students, of all students. And so with that in mind, it's like that has to be almost front loaded in your documents, right? As opposed to us asking it now for clarification, because we're getting those emails. Because for the public, and I hear what you're saying now and I get it, but for the public, that has to be preloaded, given the fact that's where the minds are. Because an email was like, you're spending this on this, but you're not paying any attention to this. But when you explain it to the point how you did, Ms. Carey right now, that has to be, for me, I think, so we can, people are realizing that it's not an afterthought, or we haven't thought about it, or that we're not doing anything about it. That doesn't always come across very clear. So I'm almost thinking we need to front load it in that way so that people understand that, when they're looking at this, it's already been really clear that some of the things are not monetarily measured. Others, we're not figuring out what it is going to be and where it is going to, put it that. So, because everybody's thinking like, I've gotten several conversations too, like, well, why isn't this putting there? There's putting money here and not doing that. So I think if we can front load that conversation about the things that you are doing and that it's ongoing, so it's clear ahead of time, so there's not assumptions that you're not doing anything. So I think that's where a lot of the comments, at least they were coming to me, it's like, they're not doing anything. They're just dismissing again. I know that's not it, but I'm just saying, therefore, again, we need to over communicate and front load that communication, just given just the environment that we're in, and then going forward too.
Yes, thanks for the feedback. And I will point out that because I appreciate the phrasing of approaching with the lens of equity, that our page 1 of the plan starts with our engagement of Spanish dominant families and our Black youth Santa Barbara, and lists their demands as actually the frame with which we approach the planning. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's that disconnect, like refer to at the front page, we start to talk about this is where you see that, just making that connection.
Thank you. Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I have the same, similar concerns with ethnic studies, and also the Black students' demands with the shoe mash, the students that have been, it's been several years, and just wanting also to have it be, as, Dr. Reed and Ms. Sims-Moton said, transparency and inclusion of the community, and being responsive to them, because I'm, of course, also we're getting those concerns from the community, and I was asked, I'm like, well, I don't know, honestly, so more transparency and communication is helpful.
Yes, indeed. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we are ready for a vote.
So moved. And I want to also acknowledge the work that is taken to go and to take all the consideration in responding to and being responsive to the community and where those things are. So I want to, acknowledge the intentionality in doing that again. So I would so move with moving this forward.
I'll second.
Okay, a second with Dr. Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you so much, Ms. Carey. That was a rhyme. Okay, now we're moving on to I believe it's our last, oh no, 2 more. E5, which is Mr. Tay, acceptance of measures 2016 and I-2016 and J, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I love the Oversight Committee. Please proceed.
Thank you, President Capps.
E4. I just wanted to make sure we get to E4.
Oh, I skipped over E4. I knew I was going to skip over 1. Thanks, John.
Come back to it after, Meg, if that's what. It's fine.
Let's go in order. E4, please.
All right. Well, good evening again, board members, and this should be a quick one. This is a request that came to us from our program coordinator, after school program, Kathy Serrano, who believes on the line with us. The request was for a new position in her program as for the assistant program supervisor. And we did enter negotiations with CSEA to create this tentative agreement that was agreed to. So I'm bringing that before you for your consideration. And attached was a job description as well. The backdrop to this was, if you remember, that program had 3 program supervisors just a couple years ago. One left. The other one, we reduced that position to a site coordinator, and it left that program with 1 program supervisor, which is what it currently has. And so the request came forward to get some of that day-to-day work done to add back in what we've now have as a proposal for a new position, which is assistant program coordinator, to help that 1 program supervisor. This is grant funded by ACES. And so that was the backdrop to why this new position is coming about, and it's filling that gap of what was 3 program supervisors. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. If we need to bring Kathy Serrano in, we could also do that. I believe she's with us still.
Thank you, John. Dr. Becchio, any questions or comments from the board? I believe you explained it quite well.
Thank you.
Okay, we need a motion. If you don't mind, there you go, thanks. So moved with a second by Ms. Munoz. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Tay, E5.
Thank you, Ms. Capps. So unfortunately, the president of our Bond Oversight Committee, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, was unable to attend tonight, Mr. Frank Stevens. So he has a letter or an item that he wants me to read to you. Superintendent Maldonado, welcome to Santa Barbara Unified, members of the school board. Good evening. I am Frank Stevens, chair of the Citizens Oversight Committee, Bond Oversight Committee, for the district's bond measures I and J approved by the voters in 2016. It's my pleasure to be before you again in 2020 school year report. I wish to thank our committee members for the commitment to serve on behalf of the voters and the citizens of Santa Barbara Unified School District. We are an independent committee charged with informing the public about expenditures of the voter-approved school board funds. This simply means we verify that the bond proceeds are expended only for those school projects on the ballot of conformity with guidelines set forth in Proposition 39 and Assembly Bill 1908. The 2020 Measure I and J reports have been approved by the Oversight Committee. That's the report that's on your screen now. Measure I relates to the secondary school facility projects. The committee has received regular project updates for work schedule and completed through the use of Measure I bond funds to date. From the total of $1 million in bonds sold, there's approximately $39 million remaining available Measure I bond funds. Committee has received and reviewed copies of their annual audit independent performance and financials for Measure I. We are pleased with the completed projects, monitor these progress, and await for the beginning of more Measure I projects. Measure J relates to elementary facility projects. The committee has reviewed the project reports for Measure J. We have discussed expenditures and questioned staff to ensure the expenditures are consistent with and comply with Measure J ballot language. Of the total $40 million in bonds sold to date, there's approximately $26 million remaining available Measure J bond funds. The committee has received and reviewed the copies of the annual independent performance audit for Measure J. One additional note, on the agenda item for December committee meeting, a specific concern related to the Measure I project will be discussed. This agenda item is in regards to the Santa Barbara Stadium project. Staff is familiar with the concerns, and I told the school board, and I am told the school board has also been informed. As you know, School board members recall in the past I have personally apologized for Santa Barbara High community for the continued delays in the completion of this very important project. The committee has been informed that the project approvals are very close to completion. I can only say finally. However, in the meeting our legal and expected duties, the committee will study any stadium-related concerns while recognizing the importance of the due diligence, accountability, and transparency. Discussions with staff will continue and appropriate responses will be issued if deemed appropriate following future committee meetings. Thank you for your attention. Please do not hesitate to contact your Citizens Bond Oversight Committee if you have any questions. And our very capable Angela Wells, the district's business service office, can forward contacts to us. So that is Mr. Frank Stevens, the chair of the CBOC meeting. So the report that you have in front of you is our annual report that says exactly what Mr. Stevens said in his note.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. I just want to say, I wish you were here, although I don't blame him, but Mr. Stevens does our community such a service by serving on these oversight boards. When I was thinking about running for the school board, I joined the oversight committee in order to get oriented. And of course he was on that as well. And he just, I don't know how many, we need to tally up how many perhaps decades that he's done this service for us all. So any questions from the board or comments directed to Mr. Tay? If you don't mind, Brian, if you could stop sharing, then I can, thank you. Okay, Dr. Reed, there you are.
All I want to say is reiterate what Ms. Cap said about Mr. Stevens, because he has been an amazing community member on these committees, and I miss seeing him tonight too. I'm hoping he's fast asleep, but I appreciate all the efforts that he continues to do for our district and our community, and I just wanted to acknowledge him for that.
Yes, excellent. Okay, well, I think we just move forward by accepting this. Ms. Ford?
May I make a motion?
Yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion to accept Measure I 2016 and J 2016 Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Annual Report for June 2020.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Moten. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have one remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tay. Action 6. So it's, let's see, in the case number, I'm going to actually make the motion in the case number 2019-20 UCPI. The motion is to give direction to Dr. Wagnick to review and, if appropriate, revise policies regarding bullying and discrimination. In addition, direction to provide training for administrators and staff on these topics and include a focus on the importance of gender neutral and person first language. I believe I captured that. So for that, I think the way that it goes, I need a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Ford. All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries. We are now, that concludes our action agenda. Coming events. Or future agenda items. Ms. Ford.
Well, I'm sure there are specific back to school nights that are coming up, and I hope as many people as possible can attend them. But I just actually need to apologize and say that I also forgot another back to school night that I attended. It was also well organized, interesting, and innovative, and that was San Marcos High School. So congrats to that staff, the parents, and Dr. Glacier.
You just have to make sure we all know that you were at that one too. I'm kidding. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, well, that means unless there's any other topics here, future agenda items, our next meeting, I'm just double checking, it is October 13th. And with that, I move to adjourn this meeting at 10:31, which is better. Doing better. Thanks to everyone for such professional work, and for the public who has hung in here with us and asked great questions and continues to engage with us on behalf of our students, teachers, and staff. That concludes the meeting. I'm adjournment, and everyone have a good rest of the evening and back to work tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.